Good morning. Today is Tuesday, December 8th, 2020. It's 10:33 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning, Commissioner Decker.
Present.
Commissioner Bonner, absent. Commissioner Kalanche.
Here.
Commissioner Soboroff.
Present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum also present. We have the Executive Director, the Inspector General, the City Attorney, Chief Moore, and Chief Frank.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you very much. And welcome to everyone this morning. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you are staying safe and healthy in these extraordinarily challenging times. Today's agenda we have that was published publicly last Friday is summarized as follows. We will have the report of the Chief of Police, public comment, then we will go to the regular agenda, which includes a presentation on a survey conducted by LMU, an audit on body worn video and digital in-car video. We have 3 updated policies on chokehold, carotid chokehold, hate crimes, and contact with persons experiencing mental illness. We have 2 technology policy proposals on ALPR and photo comparison. We have a report to City Council on co-response units, and we also have 4 grants, 3 donations, and an OPG report. Item T, by the way, is off calendar. That will be handled sometime in January, and we have 1 closed session matter. A reminder to all members of the public that if you wish to participate in public comment, that will be heard during item 2 on the agenda, to which we will dedicate 45 minutes. Members of the public can have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. And at the request of the speaker, they can be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a total of 3 minutes in total. Members of the public can participate in this meeting as indicated on the agenda in a number of ways: by calling in and listening to the broadcast, but in that process, one cannot participate in public comment. You can submit written public comment in advance of the meeting to the email address policecommission@lapd.online. And you can zoom into this log into this Zoom call today and raise your virtual hand. And if you call in via telephone, you can press *9 if you wish to speak on an agenda item. Our first matter on the agenda today is the Chief of Police report. And Chief, I also know that there's a possibility you may need to go to the City Council today, which we understand. Fiscal issues are on the forefront of everyone's mind. And so, of course, I'd ask you to address that. In addition to the regular agenda, the regular items you'll report on, I'd also ask you to address the COVID numbers and the rising numbers. And of course, sadly, the passing of Sergeant Cueto, and our condolences, of course, to the department and his family. A very sad announcement that was made, as I thought he was on the mend. But with that, Chief of Police, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam President and the Board of Police Commissioners. Good morning. As I do each week, a number of items that you've identified here. Let me first start by taking this moment to recognize the loss of Sergeant Fred Cueto from the Foothill area, a 22-year veteran of this department that we lost on Sunday. Just 2 weeks prior to that, he had come down with the COVID virus, and we had hoped and thought that he was going to be able to survive this terrible virus, but unfortunately we lost him on Sunday. He leaves behind a wife who's retired from this organization after decades of dedicated service, as well as 5 children, 2 of them minors and 1 of them a young age of 13. Sergeant Cueto represents the 3rd member of this organization who we've lost to this pandemic, and reminds us all of the risks and the dangers that are engaged, all of us, but particularly our members and our first responders as they go out each day to provide for the safety of the city. Much as we've seen with healthcare workers and others across this region, we have had a marked increase in the number of COVID positive cases. As of this morning, I have a 2nd supervisor, a sergeant, who's also in the hospital suffering from the impacts of this pandemic. We are now over 1,000 individuals that have tested positive. That's an increase of 113, a startling number as you look at it. But again, it's masking, or it's mirroring what we're seeing in other first line responders, and with 312 of those individuals at home, that's an additional 71 that are currently convalescing in efforts to isolate and recover from this virus. I'm thankful that 698 have returned to work. That's an increase of 47 from last week. So we're in the height of this, and yet as we listen to our public health officials and other public officials, we know that this increase in this pandemic in the aftermath of the recent Thanksgiving holiday season is likely to continue. Our work internally as an organization is to continue to insist on the wearing of masks and face coverings by all of our personnel whenever possible. Our worksite inspections have continued, and I'm proud of the work of our people that I'm hearing positive and very complimentary reports by Department of Public Health on their worksite inspections for our adherence to social distancing, as well as personal protective measures, occupancy of buildings, spacing, as well as the availability of hygiene services. In the field, our work continues, encouraging everyone in Los Angeles to adhere to the safer at home requirements, both here at the city, state, and county levels. We, as a practice, will continue to respond to calls for service involving prohibited activities by businesses, and work with the mayor's office relative to utility shutoffs, and as well as citations for their operation. As to individuals' actions, we will continue to distribute masks as they are available, and also encourage compliance. It is important as we enter this holiday season that we recognize that this third surge in cases is real. Our hospital capacities are at near limits. Our ICU capacity is under 10%. The amount of physical space is not the challenge for us going forward on hospitalizations. It is it's the availability of medical staff. So please, recognizing the impact this is having on our medical staff, as well as the increased number of COVID positive cases for our medical front line, I'm asking everyone to exercise safety, exercise good health practices, and wearing and donning their masks, as well as in limiting their interactions. We are, as a department, obviously respond to tens of thousands of calls, and we deal with people each day on a number of varieties, whether it's a victim of a crime or a person who's preying upon others. And so we are in the forefront, and we'll continue to do everything possible to minimize the dangers to our people as well as to the public. Our desk operations will remain shuttered, as will online reports and other avenues be utilized in order to minimize this risk of this pandemic. Moving on to other issues facing us today. As far as significant instance issues, this last week we began a series of conference calls as part of the larger LA County task force on the public health vaccination planning and implementation. I've appointed Deputy Chief Pete Zarcone to be our lead within the department, working with Department of Mental Health, Mayor's Office, as well as LA Fire and other public agencies, as well as private institutions that will be responsible for the logistics, education, and prioritization of those individuals that will receive the vaccine beginning as soon as this month, with the initial earmark of cases of vaccines that will be geared toward our public health workers, as well as those in long-term care facilities that are most at risk from this COVID virus. We'll have more information on this in the weeks ahead, but I want want the public to know that LAPD will stand with our partners in public and private industry to do everything possible to ensure the safe transport and logistics are in order to distribute this in a manner that saves our lives and saves the impact on all the communities of Los Angeles. I do expect that this is a Herculean effort, and that this will take time and patience, and we just ask for everyone in the interim that the best, most preventive measure is their own personal protective efforts with masks, hand sanitizer, and staying at home. Secondly, I participated in our employee wellness webinar this last week involving resilience and coping. We see in this holiday time, not just our rank and file and members of our organization, but throughout this region, increased levels of anxiety, nervousness, depression. And this was a webinar that I want to thank our BSS professionals for affording to our rank and file, as well as their family members and friends, to sit and talk about and work through good strategies to help encourage the heart, deal with our resilience and coping skills. This last week, we participated in a number of COVID compliant and safe distance outreach and engagements. Our Operation Thank You celebration by the San Fernando Valley Collection of Chambers of Commerce via a Zoom meeting was a bit of a holiday cheer and also recognition of the public service that many members of this organization, as well as other members in the public safety network, provided. It was good to at least see those see members of our chambers across the San Fernando Valley, at least visually via Zoom, hear their voice and celebrate and have a bit of holiday cheer. I also want to thank Chief Tingarides and the San Fernando Valley Garden CSP site, where they had a holiday tree lighting, the first annual. So we'll set a scenario going forward each year for an outreach and engagement. And at that location, we had hundreds of prepackaged meals that were handed off to various residents in the area, and as well as some holiday cheer with some musicians and others that, again, in a manner just to try to lighten the heart. This past Saturday, we had the annual gun buyback that was hosted at 4 different sites. I want to thank Mayor Garcetti and his staff, as well as the philanthropic community that afforded us the ability to hand out gift cards to some 233 instances of assault weapons, revolvers, handguns, rifles that were gathered and donated or surrendered, if you will, anonymously to the organization. Those will all be destroyed, or 233 less weapons that pose a risk to someone else of gun violence. Ms. Tremblay was also there with her grid staff and helped facilitate with the staffing of those 4 sites. Yesterday, I participated in a special meeting of the Budget and Finance meeting, a meeting that took action relative to a CAO's report involving a shortfall in city revenues. This pandemic, as we've all heard in many public accounts, has created a significant deficit in the organization of the city of Los Angeles, some 600+ million. Yesterday was estimated to be as high as 675 million. Last Friday, the chief administrative officers issued their second financial status report, second quarter, and identified strategies in order to overcome this. In that was recommendations in which to meet a $52 million reduction of this department's budget in order to be a part of the solution of the overall deficit removal. I must say that I spent a couple hours talking and discussing the impacts of what was recommended, which at the time was some 1,700 layoffs of department sworn and civilian personnel. Catastrophic, crippling recommendations that, in my view, in relationship to the efforts to collect or save $51 million, was entirely disproportional. These proposed cuts, I am thankful, were reduced. However, they're still moved from that Budget and Finance to the City Council today for consideration. Continued layoffs in excess of 300 sworn personnel and 250 civilian personnel. Again, not just hiring freezes and further reductions in a workforce, but actual layoffs of personnel. I believe that these proposals jeopardize public safety, they jeopardize police reforms, they jeopardize our efforts to build diversity, and our elected leaders must find alternatives, and I believe they exist. This is a city that has vast resources, and while it is in the most catastrophic set of circumstances financially, the amount of savings that is being pursued from this department by the elimination of 1,700 personnel, or even just the simple that some people may feel simply stop hiring, which will reduce us staffing wise by an additional 300 to 400 personnel, would have devastating impacts. Now, I say that in relationship to what this department has already encountered this year, which in July of this year, with the budget imposed by the City Council, moved $151 million from our budget and make it available, a portion of that, to defer furloughs for other city employees, and to place $90 million for alternatives for city services. Yesterday, an item on that agenda for Budget and Finance earmarked those $90 million for a series of street repairs, park enhancements, street sweeping, and street resurfacing, among other activities, including some youth programs and some community engagement. First and foremost, this city's primary function is the safety of its communities, and public safety must be its primary objective during such tumultuous times. We've got to focus on the basics, and the basics is public safety with police and fire. So I look forward to talking with the full City Council today, encouraging them to allow this organization to continue to deal with the reduction in staffing that has already been imposed on us by this current fiscal year, and to make up the shortfall through earmarking a portion of the monies that had previously been taken from the department or removed from the department's budget for purposes of maintaining our staffing. I am significantly concerned. The amendment before the City Council today is for 355 fewer sworn personnel. If we look at those 355 sworn personnel, they are all currently on probation and new hires. They represent a significant amount of diversity. 25% are women. Over 50% are Latino. And the numbers of Asian Pacific Islanders and Blacks are similarly increased. 16% are African American men and women. These would be the first that we would remove. So the cutbacks are not just the staffing that would reduce stations that would cause the elimination, the closure of stations such as Olympic, Topanga, or Mission. Areas that may feel like their public safety is in jeopardy, but actually have lower levels of violent crime in those areas than other areas that we'll have to protect with these smaller deployments. But also losing ground on our efforts to build diversity and police reforms that are so critical to the success of Los Angeles Police Department in 2021. So I look forward to talking today further about these implications, and I'm hopeful that the council can and will find alternatives to what is presently before it. Lastly, as I talk each week about any categorical, we did have an animal shooting that occurred on the 3rd of December at approximately 9 o'clock at night at the 5400 block of Homestead Avenue in the Southwest area. Their officers were conducting a follow-up investigation involving a victim of a criminal threat. As officers entered a driveway of an apartment complex, they unexpectedly were charged by a pit bull. The dog aggressively ran at one of the officers, and the officer, being confronted, fired one round from their service revolver or from their service weapon, striking the pit bull. Unfortunately, the pit bull did expire at the scene. Fortunately, no officers were injured in this event. A Force Investigations Division did respond and will conduct a full investigation, which will be brought before this commission in your determination as to it being in or out of policy. Year to date, our number of officer-involved shootings total 27. Last year, that number was 26. Our average for 4-year average is 33. Year to date, we have had a total of 7 fatal officer-involved shootings. Last year, that number was 12, and our 4-year average is 14. Our crime picture did improve this last week with 3 homicides that occurred, which was the same number as the same week last year. However, shooting violence was 17 shooting victims versus this time last year being 11. So while shooting victims did drop, the previous week was at 30 or approximately 30. We have seen a reduction in that. It is still not gotten back to our seasonal levels that we'd seen in years past. Year to date, we've had, for instance, December to date, we've had 12 victims shot. Last year in December, by this date, we had 4. So our struggles and efforts continue to reduce the level of violence in our streets and in our parkways and public places. And we continue to work with our gang reduction youth development advocates and intervention workers and ambassadors to quell these minor disputes and other disturbances that are resulting in this gunplay. We have the rest of the stats are posted online. For sake of brevity or for sake of time, I'm going to refer the public to our online postings for crime and as well as our personnel numbers regarding our staffing at sworn and civilian levels. And of course, I'm available for any follow-up conversation or questions regarding my report today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Moore. Again, condolences on the passing of Sergeant Cueto. And as you indicated, it's a reflection of what is happening in our community and so many lives being lost. And we simply cannot do enough to protect each other during this time. So I'm very hopeful that your comments about everyone wearing protective gear is taken to heart. But Chief, if I could turn to the fiscal issues that you highlighted, I want to be sure we have a clear understanding of your summary. Earlier this year, $150 million or so was cut from the LAPD budget. 2 weeks ago, I guess it was now, a proposed budget for next fiscal year was sent to the mayor's office that had an additional 3% on top of that 150 million. And what is being proposed is in addition to what is the proposed 3%. Is that correct?
Yes, so you have a couple different 3% rolls. The budget that this commission approved and forwarded the mayor did involve a 3% cut from this year's budget that was adopted in July by the council. And it was achieved through essentially further reductions in overtime, cash compensation, and cutbacks in capital, such as equipment and technology, life cycle, and basic requirements moving forward. It did hold at 9750 approximately our sworn staffing and 2850 on our civilian staffing with furloughs. What in the midst of this, the council and mayors directed in this past September a separate and apart 3% exercise and directed departments to provide how, in this department's case, $52 million for this fiscal year would be obtained. Now, as a department, this 3% was applied to every department across the city, uniformly flat without regard to size or complexity or criticality of department operations. For the department, we have already submitted and actually endured a 7% reduction with the July imposed city council budget, meaning that in addition to the 3% exercise that we did submit and was responsive to, which identified that we would have to lay off 355 sworn personnel, 273 civilians, on top of no hiring. So not just attrition, but layoffs. That was on top of a staff reduction that this department has already taken in the midst of dealing with today of nearly 500 personnel, over 500 personnel when you look at our staffing just a year ago. So these are what is so striking to me is that to have a cost savings of $52 million, which I recognize is a large number, but this is a multi-billion-dollar city operation. The benefit versus the risks to not just this year and our day-to-day operations, but profoundly, and I don't mean to, I'm not overstating this, profoundly for the next decade. I am gravely concerned about these cuts. To stop hiring alone has repercussions for the next 2 to 3 years as far as our ability to restart hiring. This is not a process that is just an on-off switch that goes on and off. The recruitment, the backgrounds, the development of viable candidates that can enter an academy takes months. To stop that process and start that process, we have experience over the last 30 years of this. Now, this department, as I said yesterday in Budget Finance, has been working with a mayor and a city council that over the last decade plus has not whipsawed the organization through hiring spasms and then zero hiring, only to go back to expansion and then contraction. That was a process of this organization in the 80s and 90s. And during that period of time, in each instance, this department suffered, as did public safety, because of either A, severe reductions in staffing, which resulted in my belief, increase in violent crime, loss of life, as well as a deterioration of policing in 21st century policing strategies. And then in hiring expansions, where we overhired in an effort to make up for lost time, and at times brought what was later looked upon as those that were less qualified or unqualified to be a member of this organization as an effort to build staffing. We need to avoid that. In this instance, we need to find alternatives, and that is my charge with this council and the mayor, and I intend to continue to bring light to this. The cutbacks that are envisioned here, again, if this was our first series of cuts in any period of time, we would have dealt with it the way we're dealing with it right now. We've reorganized this organization, moving hundreds of personnel from specialized posts. We've realigned activities such as moving investigations on online reporting. We've less essential functions we've stopped or downsized. This series of cuts that before us now cuts to the very meat and bone of what this organization does. And what I mean by that is this is not saber rattling. And looking at staffing levels that a hiring freeze alone would do, take us below staffing levels of when we opened up Olympic and Topanga. And I cannot, those staffing just to hold those stations require fixed posts, require assignments, not for patrols, but for detectives and for policing in those areas that I believe improve the community service there and improve public safety. We've seen that, but I cannot continue that. Jail operations will be shuttered in the Harbor Jail, in the Pacific Jail, in the Hollywood Jail. These are jails that are regional or local jails that allow officers to book, process, and release individuals locally rather than our 3 regional jails. The cutbacks encountered with 273 fewer civilians. I will not be able, we will struggle to keep 3 regional jails open and may lose one of those 3. So these are also on top of forensic science, cutbacks, or elimination of services. This will jeopardize investigation into property crimes on our forensics. This will jeopardize our ability to have administrative services, response to public record requests, oversight, and audits and controls over department operations, which is where I talk about the jeopardy to police reforms. These are reforms that have been built on, police auditors have been built on a history of the last decade of recognizing that oversight and inspection and controls improve performance and improve operations and improve public's trust. And and a presentation you'll hear later today on that public trust is how critical that is. And this is a department that must require staffing and must be properly deployed if it intends to be a 21st century police department.
Well, thank you, Chief. That was quite sobering. I do recall being with the city when there was a free. If I could keep all the microphones off, please, so that there's no feedback in the recording. Thank you. When I was with the city during the recession and there was a freeze on firefighter hiring, and then they, I think in 2013, needed to restart the process. It was a Herculean effort by the city to try and get that process up and running again. It's very difficult to create a system from nothing rather than to keep it going as well. And there was a huge cost associated with it, but also my recollection is that at least 1 or 2 classes had to be canceled because the process was flawed. It just took so much time to get it back up and running in the proper way. Chief, you talked a lot about the impact on services being provided and public safety, particularly in light of the increase of shootings and homicides. Can you put that in context for us of in this time where you're making efforts to address the rise in violence? Is there any way you can express to us what these cutbacks would mean in terms of your efforts to address violent crime?
So I can only try to draw a comparison to what staffing levels that we are envisioning here were last and what our underlying circumstances of community safety were. 2008, January 2008, this organization had 9,572 officers and approximately 3,300 to 3,400 civilians. That year, we had 392 homicides and we had 1,895 shooting victims. Those are the closeout numbers for 2007 going into January 2008. Those numbers are stark in relationship even to the increase this year of 30% in homicides. We will reach about 330, it's unfortunate, but I would project that we will be about 330 homicides this year. Well, in January 2008, we closed the year of 2007 with 392, an additional 60. Shooting victims, we are just over 1,100 shooting victims this year. We closed out 2007 with just under 1,900 shooting victims. In 2007, we had obviously tens of thousands of radio calls, but that number has grown 63% since that time to now. So as we reduce our workload, this has been the task, and I'm proud of the work of our men and women in reorganizing and staffing first our area stations, and staffing first our violent crime investigations, our homicide details, our shooting response teams, and while also maintaining our community safety partnerships in 10 different sites, and maintaining our senior leads and our efforts to have community engagement and not simply just responding to call. And we are going to struggle to do that, and we're working through it. We're going to transfer the investigation of non-criminal traffic collisions to online reporting. We're expanding the number of lesser crimes to online reporting so that we can save hours of officers to focus on their community deployments. Currently, our average response time to emergency call is below 7 minutes, but our urgent calls are around 20, and our routine calls are at an hour. The cuts that are being envisioned, even just stopping, if we were to stop hiring, will only worsen those scenarios. And again, I believe that there are options, such as when the council took action in June and July and pulled money from the department and earmarked it for alternatives, that money is still available and it should be utilized in this circumstance. I look at long-term investments that are necessary going forward, but this is a short, the matter is what's being taken now, which would curtail our hiring or produce layoffs, produce profound effects over years to come. And so this is a cash flow issue. It was referenced yesterday that it's a tourniquet, that it has to be that extreme. And as I said yesterday, I'll say today, it is a tourniquet. And when you apply a tourniquet, you're taking lesser parts of the body in order to protect the heart. The heart of the city is public safety.
And Chief,
and we have to protect that.
Thank you, Chief. So just to be clear, the money taken away from the department in earlier this year has not been reallocated. Is that correct?
40 million of it was reallocated to defer furloughs for all city employees. And the remaining 90 million was before the budget and finance yesterday, and has proposals for a host of uses across all 15 council districts, a review of which is available online for the underlying activities that it supports. My review of it found it to be a lot of capital improvements that arguably I support as an Angelino, as a person who lives in the city. I like streets that are clean, and I appreciate resurfacing and curb cutouts and park enhancements that are identified in there. But I believe that those improvements should be deferred so that we staff the organization at a level that's critical to public safety.
So it was our understanding, again, this commission doesn't manage or make budget decisions other than presenting a budget at the beginning of each fiscal year for the mayor and the city council to work on. They actually make the decisions, but it was our understanding that the money was taken away in order to fund social service programs that would alleviate some of the calls for service that the department is getting. That's how it was presented in any case. And I take it from your comments that that is not accurate. That's not how the money was being redistributed.
That's correct. It has, I agree that community health, by long-term investments in underlying social programs, education, housing, supportive services, can improve overall health. But right now, the crisis of the city is basic response, is the ability to respond to calls, ability to respond to emergencies in progress, the ability to protect Angelinos from those that are prey on them. And this again, like CPR, we need to tend to the most immediate need of public safety. The back to basics is what we're needing during this crisis of all of our generation. There is no other time that I can think of in Los Angeles history when it has had such a shortfall. But the way to fix that is not decimating police and fire.
Well, I certainly agree with you, Chief, that the core to any city functioning is public safety, and all the other services similarly have to be provided. But if you don't have public safety, you can't provide the many other important services. Chief, I know my colleagues probably have questions. I did have one other question that picked up on, I think, something you said earlier. Are all departments across the board being, I don't know if the right term is treated equally, are cuts going across the board? I'm not sure if you are aware, given that your concern is obviously the police department, but are these draconian requests being made of all departments equally?
So of all the cutbacks, there was a total of 1,900 layoffs that were proposed by the second financial status report. 1,700 plus of them were from the Los Angeles Police Department. The remaining amounts were cutbacks, layoffs for the city attorney's office, animal services, and Bureau of Engineering. So the majority of the layoffs, if you will, the vast majority fall on us. What has happened, what the ability, this, and again, this is a most troubling time. The city is pulling out its emergency reserves. It's accessing those, and will take them down to charter required levels in order to meet this moment. They're also deferring certain capital improvements, and they're also borrowing on MICLA for some operational expenses. However, what cutbacks were asked of fire and others they had room in which to provide stopping, for instance, youth services on an overtime basis in fire department, reductions of deferring of maintenance or equipment or other purchases by other departments. The aspect of a physical headcount, I believe this organization has already this year proportionally taken at least on par, if not, and in many instances well above our public safety partners. And that's where this additional cut of these 600 plus people is what is before the council today is just so extreme that I'm asking for it to be reconsidered and for us to focus on our core function.
Thank you, Chief. Colleagues, why don't I open it up for questions? Mr. Soboroff?
Chief, I'm supportive of every aspect of what you're talking about. I have a couple of questions. Do you see more funds for law enforcement coming from the federal government in the new administration? Do you see more funds coming for the city of Los Angeles for roads and for things like that from the new administration that may help alleviate some of that? And second part to that is, do you believe that the city is well prepared to try and get those funds and working hard to get those funds versus just waiting for a check to come in the mail?
Yes, on all parts. I said as part of the major city chiefs on a subcommittee on police reforms and in conversations through the executive director with the incoming Biden administration as to priorities for public safety in 2021 and beyond. And we are talking about the severe impact on local and municipalities on revenue sources that this pandemic has brought about and how it jeopardizes public safety. It's one aspect of reforms. We're committed to many other reforms, further reforms in policing to build public trust. But one area there, just from a policing standpoint, is we're calling out how these budget impacts are impacting our ability to operate in day-to-day services and safety in Los Angeles and across major cities, which are similarly incurring significant increases in violence. When you look at New York City, they have a 38% increase in homicides. Chicago is at a 54% increase in homicides. Philadelphia is at 39%. Every major city has got double digits in shooting violence and in homicides. And while we believe there is an interplay with the unrest and anxiety and unemployment and conditions brought about by the pandemic, we also believe that it has to do with civil unrest and dissatisfaction with police and lack of trust in police and also criminal justice reforms that may be posing individuals who feel like there's a time right now in which they can exact the violence on others with little or no consequence. Those are all compounding factors that that reduction in policing could not be at a worse time. So we are petitioning for their support through our law enforcement liaisons with the federal government. I know that, and firmly have confidence that Mayor Garcetti and our elected officials are pursuing relief through the state and federal government. The state right now has a multi-billion-dollar surplus, and it is a surplus that, while there is no one is rich with abundance of resources, the problem the city has is a short-term problem. It's a revenue issue brought about by a lack of hotels, a lack of tourism, lack of tax revenue that will be restored. The question is, what do we do in the interim before it's restored? And that's where the fixed costs of security and policing and fire must be maintained if we wish for investments of capital into this city. There is no guarantee for corporate America and others that look to this as a vibrant world-class city. If it's not safe, if people don't feel comfortable here, that they don't feel their money has a future of prosperity. We can look at Hollywood, we can look at downtown historic core, we can look at areas across the city that in the 90s were devastated by crime. And it took leaders such as Tom Gilmore and others to believe in the future and the restoration of these cores. And it also took public safety. Cops count, police matter. When Chief Bratton came to this organization in 2001, 2002, he said, build this organization. We're at 9,200 people. And under the leadership of Mayor Hahn, Mayor Villaraigosa, Mayor Garcetti, we have built this organization, we as a city, and now those are all in jeopardy. And I just ask for, because of short-term, I believe short-term matters, that this department in the city can work its way out from.
Chief, is the city willing to change some of its requirements? Is there a lot of money to be saved for us if we were leasing certain kinds of equipment or automobiles versus the outright expenditure? And just that the city has had a blanket policy against no leasing. Are there things like that that can be looked at in this environment?
I think that in the long term, those offer, we should always continually look at price modeling, cost modeling. But this is an organization that is nearly 96% personnel costs. And so the ability to generate savings that has been asked of the department is only as a result of cutting the number of staffing. And that's, again, what other departments have been able to avoid. We have not been able to avoid because we've already gone through tax or cut measures with $151 million that was removed from the department's budget. That involved a reduction in staffing, an elimination of cash compensation for overtime, and equipment purchases and capital improvements that were just wiped off the table. And so I don't have room again to go back at that, where I think some other departments have had a better opportunity of that.
Okay, and lastly, Chief, because my hope is you're going to have to jump out and go to council, so I might miss you on this, but I want to talk to you about something about the drone policy. We have had a policy that is much less active than most cities. We have had a policy that is very limited, and it's very restricted. And as we'll see a little bit later today, that it's been extremely successful, but extremely limited. The cases that the drones used, how you get to the drone, et cetera, et cetera. Now you look at your air support operation. These drones save lives. And are there places where we're increasing the scope of what we're doing can also save lives and huge dollars? Or are we going to be, or if we'd like to keep the policy the way it is, we may be forced to make changes. Other cities around the country's policies are much more liberal than our policy as far as unmanned, and the safety of officers and the safety of the public is right there. Are we going to have to relook at things like this?
Well, we continually look at each of our operations for efficiencies and effectiveness. I believe that the proposals before you, as well as the report card of the small UAS program, demonstrates responsibility, demonstrates accountability, demonstrates an adherence to the desires of this commission that the operation of those devices be limited, that there'd be tight controls and oversight, that the privacy interests of everyone involved be protected. And at the same time, that we also protect officers by utilizing them in these drones in a fashion that saves lives by not exposing officers unduly to risks, as well as saves lives by letting offenders and people who are perhaps barricaded that believe that they're somehow secluded and out of view, to know that for them to know that we know they're there, and encourage them via that tactic to surrender peacefully. The effort now is that the technology continues to grow and expand, and we see efficiencies relative to collision investigations that are complex and involved, that are taking hours at a time, that can take minutes in place by utilizing this technology smartly. So I think incrementally, given the underlying issues of public trust that some advocates, privacy advocates, have raised, is that incrementally we're making the right steps in the right directions at the right pace. And I would look over time for us to continue this, and for mission creep unnecessarily. We recognize that fire department uses the same technology for thermal imaging on fires, for search and rescue in instances involving efficiencies, as well as the type of topography that they're going against. So I think right now it balances at the right time, at the right moment with this technology. But going forward, to your point, as the fiscal crisis will continue this year and the next, we're probably 2 to 3 years away from a substantial recovery, given the enormity of this pandemic. We'll have to continue to see what are the best use of our finite resources for public safety. My commitment to do that.
That's it, Commissioner Soborov, sir? Yeah, Commissioner Kalanche.
Thank you. Hi, Chief. I know you have limited time, so I have a couple of questions, but first, my condolences again to the Gueto family. Just questions so that I can understand some of these numbers. So what is proposed at City Council today is a reduction of 355 less officers, or does that include the civilian personnel? Is that a total, or is that just for officers?
That's just for the officers.
Okay.
355 sworn, 273 civilians. That's in addition to about 250 civilians that are on the separation incentive program.
So those close to 600 or a little bit over 600, what is the amount? What would be the budget?
The cost savings are, depending on the calculation, will not even reach half of the amount needed to garner the $51 million. So the challenge you have with layoffs is that these are budget gaps they're trying to cover between now and July 1st. Mm-hmm. Layoffs, if they were authorized today, would go back to the department to direct us to develop layoff lists. People mm-hmm. that will be last in, first out. They'll be the most recent hires will be those that will be subject to removal. That list will then go to the personnel department, and they will then scour and look through that list to ensure that it's accurate and complete. And mm-hmm. then if there's any options of transferring any of those individuals, it'd be the civilians, not the sworn, mm-hmm. to other specialized posts that are under some kind of special funding. Then they would produce a final layoff list, and it's envisioned that at best they would be implemented as early as March or early April. And so the amount of people that are in this, that's why the number initially was 1,700, is mm-hmm. because you only picked up 3 months right. of cost savings. The City Council, the Budget and Finance opposed that because it was just too severe, and they pulled back to what this department had provided in that exercise. When we identified the 355 sworn, 273 civilians, we did that with 6 months of salary projections, not because there was support on this organization by myself or others to actually do those layoffs, but in response to the direction that we give a model that would identify, and also, frankly, for me to demonstrate that there weren't sacred cows, or there weren't hidden treasures or untapped resources. And the CAO basically came back and affirmed that there weren't areas or other options other than the removal of staffing and the downsizing of staff in this organization.
Okay, so you're thinking that getting the 90 million back would prevent you from having to lay off those 600 plus?
Oh, not 90 million.
That's what they have left though, right?
Yes, but the city's only, my portion, our portion, the department's portion of this is 52 million. And we covered a portion of that with further reductions in some of our capital accounts, technology and equipment. So probably about 45 million is what would be needed. And what we're saying is that, yes, accessing that account, recognizing that the slate of improvements were really capital improvements, not programming that's going to have immediate impact on public safety. If this was a matter that somehow they had an alternate service delivery where I could give them 20,000 or 30,000 calls and have someone else handling those calls, then this would reduce the workload in this organization, significantly. But those resources simply don't exist at this point. And wishing on it doesn't make it so. So this earmark to make these cuts, we need to pause for a moment. We have enjoyed up to this year 10 years of crime reduction, of year after year of greater and safer city. It is the men and women of this organization in concert with partnerships around this entire city in an imperfect and unbalanced system that has been a result of that. And I can't say enough. Our police, they matter. The types of cuts that are being envisioned here take us back 15 to 20 to 30 years. And to do so for $50 million, even if it amounted to $50 million, is just beyond me as a chief. And I recognize I sit as a chief of an organization, the second largest city, and I want to measure my remarks. But I also have 4 decades of experience with this. And I have never seen such a startling report with recommending such startling amounts, period.
Well, I'm shocked that that the 150 million, which was supposed to be used to support communities, is not being used for what it's supposed to be used, what they proposed or what they spoke about using it for. So yeah, so I don't see why we need to invest in street repaving and at this point with everything going on. Okay, I just wanted to understand those numbers. And also, what about the MTA contract? Is that still going to be in place? Any reductions in that? Because I know that does provide some funds to LAPD.
The provisions in the MTA contract are a 1-for-1, meaning the department does not benefit beyond the fact that we are deploying police personnel on buses and rails that's being compensated by the MTA. So we get a secondary benefit of added police visibility and police presence on our transit lines because of the MTA contract. The MTA contract is under pressure because the MTA is suffering a similar challenge or crisis in regards to its budget. But so far, these budget cuts are entirely outside of the MTA. The MTA has slowed some of the number of our deployments because transit populations and transit loads are down about 50%. And I suspect now with the most recent stay-at-home order that those numbers have probably increased. And in the face of that, they've reduced some of the deployments. But everything I've talked about so far is outside and apart from MTA.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just wondering if if worst came to worst, would there be any opportunities for moving officers into that MTA contract instead of doing what we're doing now, which is like the overtime?
Right. No, the MTA contract, 90% of it, 90% of the MTA contract is on an overtime basis. Right. We have about 100 personnel that are fully funded. And actually it goes to this whole conversation about what our staffing levels are. When I refer to a 95, 75 staffing level in January 2008, we didn't have MTA. That's 100 officers. We didn't have security services. That's another 100 officers. We didn't have CSP. That's another 100 officers. I've counted 300 officers just on 3 programs. And when we look at saying, well, you've had this level in 2007, 2008, the reality is that the numbers that we actually have are closer to numbers that we had in 2003 and 2004.
Okay. Okay, so that helps. On a separate issue or item, I know you talked about diversity and these like new classes that are coming in and new hires. I also wanted to ask you about the employee organizations issue with diversity. And I know we probably don't have time to discuss here. And Commissioner Bonner and myself participated in a meeting with the employee organizations on diversity. But I'm hoping that at some point we could have that conversation or have more information or report back on the status. I know there's a lot of issues with personnel, the personnel department and rules, but I think it's a serious matter when you have all the employer or many of the employee organizations submit a letter asking us to look into this issue and
Absolutely.
issue of diversity.
I welcome it, and there is a current conversation relative to the fairness and equity of an exam involving the commander's test, which personnel department is reviewing, and I'll pay very close attention to their findings and recommendations. We are the organization committed to diversity, equity, to inclusion, which again, I'll just go back to this budget. 26% of our police officers on probation right now are women. We are finally making inroads in this region. 16% are African Americans. We're finally making inroads in garnering the type of diversity that this organization needs at this moment and in the next decade. Those are all in play.
Yes.
By what we're talking about here.
I totally get that, but I also want to make sure that when we talk about diversity, we're also talking about leadership in the department. So not just about like we have this diversity in our department, but yet they're not at the captain or command and above.
I welcome that conversation. I'm proud of my record. I'm proud of Chief Beck's record before me with with diversity, gender, ethnicity, and I'm committed moving forward. I think the challenge I have is in the next this next year to 2 years is even what's at risk is even promotions and upgrades because of the severity of this cutback. I fully expect that given what's pending here, I could lose staff and command officers authorities as part of this pullback. And I believe I'll say without hesitation, the upper echelons of this organization need to be diverse and representative, but it also is one of the thinnest level of command and control of any police agency in America. Sheriff counterpart, any other major city, what constitutes captains and above in this organization is approximately 110 people out of an organization that was 13,000.
Got it. I just want to make sure that's something that we make time to discuss down the road.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Kalanche, if I could ask you, and of course, Commissioner Bonner, who's not here today, but if you could relay to him, to work with Mr. Teefank, it'd be good if we could have a public forum on that at a commission meeting. If you could work together for the January, February timeframe, depending on the availability of all the presenters, it'd be good if we could flush all those issues out.
Right. And I know there's still deliberation and we're waiting for some info. So yeah, January would be great.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Well, Chief, and I think that concludes questions from the commissioners. Chief, thank you for the detail that you provided today on the current budget conversation that's happening at City Hall, the impacts. Obviously, these proposed cuts are deeply concerning for so many reasons, and it's not because the department shouldn't make sacrifices in the time of an emergency. That's not the issue at all. Obviously, there's a pandemic, revenues are down, the city is hurting, but this isn't about sharing the pain across the city. This is deeply concerning. And it's also concerning that communities that were requesting more services, that the money that was earlier taken from the department has not been used for that. The reforms we're all been working on, including so many men and women in the department, are important. The oversight's important, the training's important, the diversity is important, the hiring the next generation of officers is important. All of this is so gravely at stake, to say nothing of crime and fundamental services to the residents of Los Angeles. This is very deeply disturbing, and obviously, Chief, we know you have to leave at any moment to go to City Council to make your presentation, and I hope you do so knowing you have the support of this commission behind you, 100%. With that, why don't we, Madam Secretary, why don't we open public comment? And I know the chief will stay as long as he can, but when he has to go to City Council, we want him to be able to proceed, and Chief Frank will take his place. Madam Secretary, why don't you begin, please?
Okay, our first speaker is Betty Lay, followed by Hamid Khan.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
The chief's report and general comment.
Okay, 2 minutes.
First off, I'm almost in tears with everything that's going on. I feel so embarrassed to be connected with the mayor, city council, and the police commissioners. How dare you? I can't believe this is even happening. Have you all gone insane? You've got to listen to the police chief. You've got to listen to the majority of the people that are supporting LAPD. I'm sure you can hear the anger in my voice. This has gone on way too much. Stop it and fix it. You can all fix it. I bide my time.
Okay, next we have Hamid Khan, followed by caller ending in 3146.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
Chief's reports, 3A, B, and public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
So it's really pathetic to watch this commission conduct in a way that it becomes an apologist for a department that has had its budget doubled over the last 10 years. And when you compare that with the investments in the rest of the city, the investments in the rest of the programs around housing and shelter and youth development and various other things, it comes down to zero. So here we have a chief who is lamenting about cuts. We have a chief who's giving us a sob story that of course the same old drama of crime is going to increase, and those people are coming at your door, and we know who those people that they're talking about, that they're going to cause these harm. But at the same time, they continue to expand the police state. They continue to invest more monies in technologies that are known to have caused harm, because today you have on your agenda the body camera report, you have on your agenda the drones, you have license plate readers, and now you're speaking about creating a policy on facial recognition technologies. Now, when you look at the impact of all of these technologies, just a couple of days ago, a whole report on the impact of body cameras and how they have increased and in the justification of more harm to the community, more killings of the community, how they're becoming increasingly a data collection, which they've always been, how background footage can be used for investigations, how data is being gathered. So same thing about license plate readers, that here we are being told, where you have the state auditor even highlight that how information was being shared and data was being collected. We're seeing this mission creep happening that the coalition had, Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, has been speaking about, of supposedly the small unmanned aerial system or drones, which again, Steve Soboroff was talking about expanding more and more. So I think the issue here is that we absolutely reject, and I don't know, who the 100% of the community supports LAPD, because I don't know which community are we talking about. The communities that we have been living in or working with or talking to, there's an overwhelming rejection of the violence, overwhelming rejection of the LAPD, overwhelming rejection of the massive police state that continues to expand, overwhelming rejection of programs. We saw how the LAPD completely lies and misrepresents. Even in our own public records, they have lied. They have responded with like, well, you know, no, we don't use facial recognition technology, but then the LA Times exposed this whole thing as well. So what you have here is a complete lie, a complete deception. And rather than this commission to really listen to the people and whom they are supposed to represent and whose best interest they're supposed to represent, this is like a corporate mafia where you have the board of the directors where you become the apologist and you start expanding the violence that's going to happen. So we say that you need to reject body cameras, license plate readers, and total ban on facial recognition.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending in 3146, followed by Jenny Haggerty.
I think I unmuted. Is that me?
Hi, yes, you're on. What items would you like to speak on?
Thanks for taking my call. All of the police report, public input, and the body cams.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to say God bless Los Angeles. Again, this is Tongva Native American land. That's a problem. This is public input. One of the biggest problems is the Graham-Connor 1989 legislation from the bench. And you guys are shooting people. Like Raymond Hernandez, you shot him for 4.5 seconds with 14 bullets. Okay? You're not allowed to do that anymore. Okay? Chief's report, there was an officer hit in the eye. He didn't wear head face gear, right? So the chief isn't really looking out for him. I think the chief is a kind of an okay chief. He just lied to me, though, about the $1 million. So I want to support the chief. I'd like to say things like we need 14,000 more officers and a doubling of the budget. But the problem is if we do such a thing, you still haven't figured out how to not shoot people 14 times for 4.5 seconds. This is why I call myself the chief of police, because I want to stop the killing. By the way, I want to give a Grammy to Adam Smith. He's the best new song, new artist, and a great vocal performance for Adam Smith. Great guitar playing, great voice. People like Soboroff, you know, there's a problem with Soboroff where he supports the chief and the commission, but you notice he isn't going broke helping the LAPD. They're trying to get, a budget cut out, and Soboroff has the money. And he's not kicking down any money.
Speak on things that this commission has jurisdiction.
Okay, Miss. I'm sorry. Yeah, on the commission. That's part of the commission, Miss. Is he's on the commission, isn't going broke, and the LAPD needs money. Okay, but you haven't figured out how to not shoot people 14 times for 4.5 seconds. And this is what I have problems with. This is what I want to have changed. Okay, this has to change, madam. You can't keep shooting people. It's immoral to shoot people off of legislation from the bench. Even SB 230 is legislation from the bench. You're not allowed to shoot people for 4.5 seconds with 14 bullets. If that was your dad, would you have shot Raymond Hernandez for 14 seconds? The approach of the suspect were groups of officers. It was a good idea, but 3 of them shot him. Okay, so the way the laws are written and the way the training is, it's killing people. Okay, and this has to end. God bless the PD. Got it? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Jenny Haggerty, followed by MW. Jenny Haggerty, you're on. Okay.
Can you try to unmute?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
I'm going to do Chief's Report 3E, 3F, and general comments.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. I wanted to say thank you to Chief Moore for all you do to help the LAPD and all the officers of the LAPD. Thank you very much. I see homicides are up 29%, shootings are up 32.4%. Our city recently hit 300 homicides for the first time in a decade. People have been murdered. We cannot afford more budget cuts to our police. On the LAPD website, the commissioner's role is laid out. Part of their role includes reducing crime and the fear of crime. What are we doing to reduce crime? I would like to see the commissioner's plan on exact steps we can take to actually reduce crime and the fear of crime. We need real actions done that results in having an actual bettered condition. Commissioners, please do not vote in favor of measures that create more red tape in using photo comparison technology. We need less red tape in fighting crime, not more. Please do not approve the motion as it is now with regard to limiting access to license plate data. It limits tools and access to helpful information. Please do not allow any more defunding actions regarding the LAPD. The LAPD has already disbanded numerous units. For example, the sexual assault unit, the animal cruelty unit, homeless outreach group. As a general comment, I think it is logical to say that good, competent police officers deserve to have tools that they find valuable to control and stop criminal activity. We should want to empower our good officers. Another general comment, I am very concerned about police being vilified by certain groups. Any group can have an incompetent member in it, a church group, your work group, your friend group, your bowling group. Every group has a small percentage of bad apples. We cannot allow police to be generalized as bad when the vast majority are doing a good job. I think everybody probably in this quote room can think of a job they've worked where it's a regular quality control job where you have someone who unfortunately is incompetent. This happens in every group. It's a quality control function, but that just did not define the entire group. The rest of the company still functions and gets the job done. So in final saying, I just want to say, defend the police, do not defund. Thank you, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have MW followed by Irene Yielding.
I just want to amplify all the comments that were made by Ahmed Kam, and I'd like to speak on item 3E, 3F, item 3H, I, J, and general public comment. So if we ever wondered about what this lack of civilian oversight is with this body, Commissioner Decker, you just clarified it with your rubber stamping comment. Chief Moore, you have the support of this commission 100%. So you made it clear the lack of civilian oversight that you're giving. And you know, on the opposite end, this quote just happened at the LA City Council member meeting. This entire city budget is being held hostage by one line item, and not just fiscally. And that line item is the LAPD. In the last 7 years, with full capacity, full funding, crime statistics by the new DA, George Gascon's data, not more spend today, LA crime rates have increased by 27%. So what LAPD has been doing, what this body has been doing, is not working. Chief Moore talks about 21st century policing. It has nothing to do with him. Reimagining community safety in accordance with constitutional freedoms. That's what it has to do with, not with his draconian tactics. Chief Moore being fired is a good place to start, where we can start to focus on community care and systems of service to help root causes of crime. He can't even keep his own force safe with 1,000 COVID cases and 3 deaths internally. LAPD and our tax dollars have facilitated a super spreader event. This has got to stop. What you are voting on here today with the photo comparison technology, the automatic license plate readers, and small unmanned aerial systems, it will not make LA safer. It is a complete infringement on constitutional freedoms. Money earmarked for alternatives to incarceration headed back to the LAPD will not create safety. Further infringements on constitutional rights will not create safety. Thinking on LAPD facilitating public health with upcoming vaccinations, if facial recognition technology is in use, now more than ever, you must not vote to allow PCT. It's actually facial recognition technology, and it is unacceptable and cannot happen. Even though they've secretly been using it since 2004, breaking their own laws. LAPD has been using automatic license plates readers since 2004 and is now just attempting to cover its track with policy. You must reject it. You must reject these illegal activities by LAPD.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Irene Yielding, followed by caller ending in 7742.
Hi, before I start, I have a question. I don't see Commissioner Bonner. Is Commissioner Bonner still there? You can answer me, I promise. Is Bonner there? No, okay, yes? Okay, hi Moore. This is Stacy Dawson Stearns. I see you guys started my clock. Nice to see you. Chief Moore, your report about COVID is a joke, okay? I have photographs of Officer Lopez on Sunday at the Garcetti Mansion, screaming in people's faces without a mask on. So I'm not exactly sure what you're saying to your officers, but it's not sinking in. Decker, you pretend to be so concerned about public safety. Guess what? The LAPD is the super spreader. They're the super spreader. They don't give a fuck. And they're dying and they still don't care. So Decker, also I'd like to challenge this core to the city functioning. The core of that is public safety. I would like to switch that narrative a little bit and say it's public wellness. We don't need to be kept safe by cops. Cops are literally, on Sunday, I don't know if you guys heard about this, but they literally bludgeoned people in a crowd of children and elderly people. It's on video. You can't deny it. Now, Chief Moore, you're trying to control the narrative, and you reach out to, you had news articles out before Jamie Penn was even processed. You guys used the term lynching that hasn't been on the books since 2015. It is a triggering term. It is a false term, and it's ridiculous. And you've got a public official, a public elected official in Los Angeles who's been charged with a felony. Okay, you should be charged with the felonies. Let's just move ahead. You all make me just shake my head in sorrow. I don't know where T-Fank is, but could you please schedule these meetings at a different time? There's no wonder there's no fucking communication between city council, this body, and the board of supervisors, county supervisors, because you all meet at the same goddamn time. Right, Lou? I see you smiling. You know, it's bullshit, right? You can meet on other days of the week. Okay, all of these items, 3B, 3E, 3F, 3H, IG, it's all surveillance technology. All that equals is more money going into tech providers to limit the rights, the constitutional rights of Americans. And if you're happy doing it to Black and brown people today, guess what? It's going to be used on you tomorrow. If you don't start moving into a different philosophy, a philosophy outside of Moore's scare tactics, because it's all lies about public safety. Everything that Moore is saying is because the LAPPL refuses to negotiate, and that's why they're limiting, that's why they're cutting down certain cops in neighborhoods, not because of the money being cut. There's no money being cut. Fuck you. Fuck yourself, Moore. Fuck yourself.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending in 7742, followed by caller ending in 4874. Caller 7742, you're on.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
3E, F, and general comments, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, I'd like to start with that. We really need to listen to our police chief. Our officers need the technology to protect us. And also I'd like to comment that any talk of reducing the number of police during this time of increasing violent crime and civil unrest is asinine and irresponsible. It will be jeopardizing public safety, hands down. if to think otherwise is delusional. Also, I would like to extend my condolences to the family and friends of Officer Cuerdo. I would really like to see where the demonstrators need to social distance when they're demonstrating. The screaming in their faces, a mask is not everything. And other than, you know, what is absolutely necessary for police to get close to people, which is far too often, we need to have our police protected by social distancing. The presence of police who are visibly patrolling our streets is a deterrent to crime. Only criminals would object to having a police presence on our streets. What Garcetti is being subjected to now is a reality for anyone who does not toe the line for BLM. And I don't mean this to direct or sound snotty, but if you're all so certain, whoever it is, that police are out of control, let's do another experiment and pull LAPD off of his home, off of Garcetti's house. That can be the litmus test for the rest of us, because we're all subjected to social unrest. And the danger to society is growing exponentially. I hate to hear any talk of disregarding or downplaying the victims that will suffer and deaths that are going out now at the hands of criminals who could care less about the destruction left in their wake. Punishment works. The police have this figured out. We need to, of course, there can be reforms, but this is a societal test on us that's going to have severe consequences. I know this because my niece and two of her friends were killed by a man who did not heed the warnings of law enforcement and not punished fully. Punishment works. If he had been punished fully, their gruesome death could have been prevented. I would tell you the details of what happened to these people, but I doubt many that are listening to me could stomach it. Please don't make us stomach more of this.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending in 4874, followed by Heather C. Caller 4874, you're on.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
The chief's report and public comment, please.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. I would like to speak to the chief's crime statistics. The trends occurring in our city are terrifying. Homicides and shootings are up, arrests are down. Now we are hearing of recommendations to reduce the number of officers and resources even further. As a nurse for a major hospital, I am seeing shooting victims and innocent victims of violent crime, including young children and senior citizens in our emergency room at levels that I have not seen in my entire career. Me and my coworkers no longer feel safe even going to and from work or taking our breaks out in front of the hospital. Reducing the number of officers and limiting their resources is having a disastrous effect on public safety. Criminals are feeling emboldened, knowing that there are little to no consequences for their actions. This downward spiral must be stopped. You, commissioners, are in a position to take the situation seriously and protect the people, the businesses, and our families. Those of us that live in Los Angeles depend on you. I implore you to support the Los Angeles Police Department, provide them all of the necessary resources to reverse this trend of violent crime and restore safety and peace to our communities. Please, commissioners, please do the right thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Heather C., followed by Adam Smith.
All right.
Hi.
Thank you. I'd like to speak on all items and general comment, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thanks. Whether it be license plate readers or facial recognition, why wouldn't we use technology to help solve crimes? Commissioners, you need to tell us why this is a privacy issue. If you're in a public street, nothing's private anymore, and it shouldn't be. Cameras are everywhere now in private and commercial buildings, facing the street, picking up license plates. Are you going to ban those too? What about cell phones recording in public spaces? To what end are you going to restrict technology to help combat crime? You want to limit retaining the storage of license plates to 2 years, and it doesn't include many crimes. There are too many limits on it. What if someone finds a body at 2.5 years after a murder? If you're a parent of a murdered child whose body was found after that expiration period, you may want to know what cars are driving around that area at that time. Maybe you don't care, but I know lots of mothers who would. PCT, photo comparison technology, is a good investigative tool, improving technology that helps develop investigations. The audit procedures that you want to implement are an undue burden. Having multiple department entries is also a waste of time. It will create a hindrance and burden with so many audit procedures, and it's a setup for failure because it will discourage officers from utilizing this important tool. You need to help LAPD make things more efficient and effective, not set them up with more roadblocks that ultimately prevent competent and thorough investigations. Back to the victims. You need to think about the victims, not, criminals. And if 100 people get arrested and one of them ends up being innocent, that does not negate the other 999 guilty individuals, nor the fact that there are still 1,000 victims. My concern is that Eileen Decker and Liz Rose will laser focus on that one wrongly accused, creating policy that serves them instead of the 1,000 victims. Long after Eileen and Liz are gone from LAPD and the commission, and maybe Eileen becomes a federal judge, biased, I think, the reform measures that both of these women are implementing will hinder LAPD police work in helping victims for years to come. Their legacy will be that they caved into BLM protester demands in 2020 and were overzealous in passing extreme and damaging reform measures within the LAPD. These reform measures are being shoved down the throats of public safety interest in the LAPD. They're biased, pro-criminal, anti-police, anti-victim, and are a grave injustice to the citizens of Los Angeles. I urge the commissioners to not vote in favor of any measures that will negatively impact PCT or will create more red tape for officers using this tool, and to also extend the proposed period of 2 years for saving license plate data. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Adam Smith, followed by Sophie Wang.
Hi, can you hear me, Becky?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them?
Okay, 3 minutes.
All right. So you said, Eileen, Ms. Decker, you said that the chief, which chief is here right now? Who are we responding to in the chief's report? Because you said Moore was going to be here for a little while. It appears he's not. It appears Horace Frank isn't. So sorry, I feel like Steve. Apparently my phone wasn't was still on ring. No, but seriously, who's the chief right now that your community that you represent is speaking to? Is there a chief here?
Mr. Smith, please use your time to comment, or we'll move on to the next speaker.
Okay. Well, I was going to speak to the chief's report, but he's not here. I guess I'll speak to you, Ms. Decker. By stating, people have brought it up, but by stating unequivocally that this commission stands 100% behind the chief, and the LAPD says unequivocally that you don't stand with the community that Eric Garcetti appointed you to supposedly represent. We know by your actions week by week that you are, as a commission, 100% behind the LAPD and the chief, but to hear you vomit those words out in praise to the chief is disgusting and speaks plainly to the complicity in the expansion of all this shit that you're going to be voting on today. I guess for the record, I will say, Chief talked about the gun buyback this weekend, and I was just wondering, since you all never bring it up, has the chief said anything about those 11 stolen guns that are still missing? That his employees were trafficking, the people that you oversee as your role in police commission. Should the LAPD really be running a gun buyback program when there's still guns that were stolen and sold to police captains that are still missing? You need to end any type of facial recognition program. Chief talked about going back to basics. what does back to basics means? Lying about using facial recognition for the last 15 years? What's back to basics? Is that a drone that breaks windows before it flies back into the building? The last speaker I saw on Twitter is friends with the LAPPL. Do they have to report when they send a lobbyist to the police commission? Do they get paid to come here? Just wondering. Where's my timer, Becky? Oh, 8 seconds.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Next, we have Sophie Wang, followed by Patrick P.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
I'd like to speak on all of the items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Hi, good morning, commissioners. I just want to start off by saying that at the last meeting, over 170 people wrote in asking that you not approve the LAPD's budget that was proposed for 2021 to 2022, and that you give both you and us, the community that you claim to represent, more time than just 3 days to look through the 482-page document. If you had looked at it, you'd know that any complaints about budget cuts from Chief Moore that he made today are now moot because you just approved over $100 million of a budget increase for the LAPD between this year and this coming year that erases any reductions. So there really is no cut this coming year. And you just approved it without hesitation. Do you feel any sense of responsibility to the people of Los Angeles? If you do, then please show us that you do by listening to us this week, where there are a number of items on the agenda to come that we, the community, are asking that you reject. So items 3B, E, F, H, I, and J, all ask for the approval of reports on or donations of new surveillance technologies for the LAPD. We know that body-worn video, in-car digital video, photo comparison technology, as you're calling facial recognition technology, automatic license plate readers and drones, or as you're calling them, small unmanned aerial systems, are all technologies that LAPD uses to collect historically racist data that it uses to further criminalize already marginalized Black, Brown, Indigenous, and houseless communities in Los Angeles. I guess just a couple of things on specific agenda items. So for 3B, for body-worn video and digital in-car video, these are being touted as forms of police accountability, but really they actually function as ways for police to collect more data, to surveil the public more effectively and criminalize our communities. So please don't approve this purely procedural audit that makes it seem like the only problems are with how these technologies are used and not whether or not they're used to begin with. For 3E, please join other cities like San Francisco, Oakland, Portland, and Boston in banning the use of facial recognition technology like the photo comparison technology here. A city like LA should be setting the example, not resisting the right move for community safety. For 3H, I, and J, in 2017, when LAPD created a policy for drones, 93% of the community came out against any use and any governing the use of drones, but the police commission still voted to use drones. So just don't make the same choice today and reject the drones that are on the table now. Overall, we reject all forms of surveillance technology because it's really only an extension of policing and it's used to criminalize Black people in all of our communities. There's no way to fix technology to make it more accurate or less harmful, and no ordinance or policy will protect people from the violence of surveillance. If you want to actually represent the people for once, then defund surveillance and invest in our communities the way that the communities are asking for. Earlier in this meeting, Chief Moore said that the city has quote unquote vast resources. We know that over 50% of those already go to LAPD. This is the time to keep LA citizens alive by providing housing and food, not putting more money into the country's most violent police department. Reject these reports and do not approve new donations.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Patrick P, followed by Lorena Sanguino. Patrick P, you're on.
Hi there. I'd like to speak on the Chief's report, item 3F, and general comment, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
LAPD morale is down. Homicides are up 29%. They're the highest they've been in over a decade. Shootings are up 32.4%. A newly elected DA is pushing change that'll hurt our officers. City council mismanaged money and found a scapegoat to point the finger to, and decides to take money away from the police officers and then lay off 1,000 of them. And this police commission board is concerned about storing data on license plates? The commissioner's concerns are reflective of the community at large, and their priorities include implementing recommended reforms, improving service to the public by department, reducing crime and the fear of crime, and initiating, implementing, and supporting community policing programs. Instead, you guys are choosing to pass reform to limit our officers. What a disgrace. Cut the red tape. This commission needs to be effective and efficient. All you're doing is pandering to the few and not listening to the people. What is this police commission's plan to reduce violent crime? I don't think the board should be in favor of any kind of cuts, loss of funding, or losing any of our well-trained and disciplined officers who put their lives on the line every day to keep us safe. Stop caving to the protesters because it's blowing up in your faces. It's about time we start to expose each one of you. The nonprofits you run, yeah, like yours, Kalanchi, and the special interests you have in mind. We can start with Eileen Decker, though. I heard that you might get a seat as a federal judge if Biden were to win. I thought judges were supposed to be non-biased. Instead, you're pro-BLM, anti-law, and siding with the criminals. It's time for the nonsense to end. Defend the LAPD, not defund. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Lorena Sanguino, followed by Mrs. H.
Hello?
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
Chief's report 3E, 3F, and public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, good morning. Oh, I guess Chief's gone, but good morning or afternoon, commissioners. I would like to give the commissioners a round of applause for helping facilitate the great milestone of the city having 3 homicides in 1 year. Hasn't happened in over a decade, but you commissioners made it happen. Thank you, commissioners, for your continuous denial that defunding efforts will decrease crime. And by your design, crime stats are up again. When I reviewed the most recent crime report, it lit up like a Christmas tree. All the red numbers representing increases in crime. Homicides up 29%, gang-related homicides up 26%, gang-related shots at dwellings up 46%. All I saw were red crime stats jumping at me like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Is this your idea of spreading holiday cheer, commissioners? Is this your plan to make the entire crime stats page red to ring in the new year? 1,100 shooting victims this year? Commissioners, unfortunately, you redefine your role to placate to criminals and abandon victims of crime. In case you forgot, I will remind you, according to dictionary.com, a criminal is a person guilty or convicted of a crime. Synonyms are corrupt, illicit, unlawful, but you sit there trying to gaslight the community by telling us the criminals are the victims. Commissioners, it is clear from the data that is not racist that you choose to disregard the lifetime suffering of real victims. Commissioners, stop approving defunding efforts. Commissioners, what's wrong with technology? Aren't we using a myriad of technology to even participate in this meeting? Schools and businesses use advances in technology to improve and streamline work products, but for some reason, the police commissioner wants to take LAPD back to the Stone Ages. Why don't you just remove much needed technology tools? Body-worn video is a technology tool you commissioners push for, but for some reason, another piece of technology is unwarranted. Why are you in favor of technology that you think will catch bad cops, but you don't want to support methods that will advance positive policing efforts? How long did it take to find Grim Sleeper? Wasn't it more than 2 years? You know 2 years isn't enough to retain license plate recognition information. Aren't all license plates seen in public on a daily basis anyway? Doesn't everyone, including your precious criminals, have used the smartphones and cameras that they use to victimize law-abiding citizens? But license plates that are attached to vehicles using public roads within public view and public property are subject to privacy? Commissioners, I urge you not to vote in favor of a measure that will negatively impact the use of photo comparison technology and not to approve license plate recognition motion, as officers need to access as much data as possible to adequately and efficiently conduct quality police work. So remember, commissioners, when the Olympics roll into town in 2028, the globe will use their technology to find out that you, this commission, were solely responsible for the decay of this city. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Mrs. H, followed by Steven Saletros.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
I'll speak on all the items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, first I would like to extend my condolences to the LAPD and the family of Officer Cueto on their loss. He was a member of our community and he will be missed. I would also like to ask that this commission honor his memory by continuing the police tradition of protecting and serving our community, because it is becoming readily apparent that this commission is pandering to domestic terrorists and thugs rather than serving the greater community. While the governor looses felons onto our streets, this commission seems to cater to political correctness rather than serving the public. While the chances of an unarmed Black man being shot by a police officer are vanishingly small, the chances of an unarmed Black man, woman, or child being shot by a Black person is alarmingly high. I'm asking what this commission intends to do to protect the law-abiding citizens from the criminals in our communities. Homicides are up by 29% by your own statistics. This isn't from police brutality, yet the commission seems to jump through hoops to protect lawbreakers. You create more and more rules and red tapes that keep an officer from doing the job he has committed to doing, and you're making it more difficult and dangerous than it already is for both the police officer and for the public. Why would you want to stop any technology that would aid in the identification and arrest of criminals? To me, the only reason would be to make the criminal's life easier and the public's life more dangerous. Those criminals have no problem with videoing the public, saying that we're in the public eye so they can film us. What I'm asking here is, what is the plan? Are our officers going to continue to serve and protect our community, or will they merely become window dressing and targets for violence by entitled thugs? I am especially calling out Commissioner Decker for her continued biased behavior, pandering to left-wing extremism and violence instead of serving the greater community of law-abiding people. We do not have a police brutality problem. What we have is a problem of entitled criminals who are currently staging a coup against our police, against our community, and against our nation. And our police are our first line of defense. You must stand firm and support our police and our community against such evil. If the police are not going to be the first line of defense, there will be others who will stand up. We are tired of the continued hate and destruction by these evil groups. And if you think your new administration will support the police after listening to the hate and defunding and all the lies, you are seriously deluded, because that is their platform. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. Next,
And this is our last speaker, Madam Secretary.
Next, we have Steven Saletros.
Very difficult. And we do believe that we should look.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
1, 2, and 3.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. First, my condolences to Sergeant Cueto and his family. It's a tragic loss. Every loss is tragic. But I just want to make sure I say that first. Respect and honor to him. I obviously support the police. I've spoken here before. I am defending the police, and I'm against defunding the police. When it's talk about technology, facial recognition is a valuable tool. It's used in London very effectively. I think they really were the leaders for that type of technology and utilizing it to prevent crime. I highly recommend that that technology is used at city parks. Okay, city parks is a place where crime occurs, obviously, where different gangs sometimes will congregate. Eventually there will be a crime, and there may be people who are either not going to step up as witnesses for fear of retaliation, or maybe they just didn't see what happened late at night or in the darkness. So that kind of technology should be utilized to prevent crime, because when people know they're on video, there's less of a chance of them actually committing a crime there. And our city parks need to be safe places for people to be able to go. I'm getting a little tired of the build public trust mantra that I hear from the police commission and the chief. The way you build public trust is by communication. You see what we're doing here is basically a one-way conversation. There really is not much of a dialogue where, for whatever reason, and maybe they can explain it at some time, we do not get answers to questions. We make suggestions about the 45-minute limit, which is 45 minutes is inadequate for public comment. There's no list of people that are actually going to be on, like a queue. I think that's part of the respective communication. Community engagement was mentioned by the chief. basic things need to be done on the LAPD side. One is start answering the phone. Okay, there are many people who are frustrated in the city, and it's because they can't get through to the LAPD. They don't get callbacks. They don't get follow-up information, and it's very frustrating for them. These are people generally that are victims that need the help, and people who support the police, but you're going to diminish the pro-police support if you're not communicating. I'll bring up the senior lead program very quickly. There needs to be more engagement. They should have Zoom meetings. I don't see any of that occurring in the division that I happen to live in and in the community. So we need to really work on that. And the police commission should be looking at an audit. How many senior leads are actually having Zoom meetings with the community, neighborhood watch meetings? Where is the community engagement? The community engagement has to be real. It's not just a phrase. So I think my time is about up. All be safe.
Thank you. That concludes item 2 on our agenda, the public comment period. We'll move on to the regular agenda. Commissioners, I would, at the end of our agenda, items L through S, I'd like to take those up because some of the presentations that are coming up may be lengthy. And so these matters I'd like to handle largely because if history is any guide, there'll be little to no questions regarding items L through S. These are 4 grant programs, 3 donations, and an OPG matter. I will take them up individually, but first may I ask members of the commission if there are any questions on items L through S. Seeing no comments,
No.
I'm going to take them now one at a time for votes so that the staff members that are waiting on these items can return to their regular duties. So first, item L, I'll call up, which relates to the Selective Traffic Enforcement Grant Program. The recommended board action is to approve the department's report and transmit to the mayor and city council, which I will move. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes 3-0. Item M is a grant application and award for the 2020 DNA Capacity Enhancement and Backlog Reduction Program. The recommended board action is to approve the department's report and transmit concurrently to the mayor and city council. I'll move that forward. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 3-0. Item N is the department's report relative to the transmittal of a grant application and award for the Intellectual Property Enforcement Grant Program. The recommended board action is to approve the report, transmit concurrently to mayor and city council, which I will move. Is it seconded? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It passes 3-0. Item O then is a grant application and award for the Off-Highway Motor Vehicle Recreation Grant and Education Safety Program. The recommended board action is to approve the department's report and transmit concurrently to the mayor and city council. I'll move that forward. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That item passes 3-0 as well. Item P is the department's report relative to the approval of a non-monetary donation of face masks in the amount of $48,000 from the Police Foundation for the benefit of the Emergency Services Division. The requested board action is to approve the report and transmit to the mayor and city council for acceptance. I will move that forward. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes 3-0. Item Q is the department's report relative to approval of a non-monetary donation for the CSP outreach items in the approximate value of $10,200 for the benefit of the CSPB. The recommended board action is to approve the report and accept the donation. I will move it forward. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? that item passes 3-0 as well. Item R is the department's report relative to a non-monetary donation in the value of $2,625 for the benefit of Operations West Bureau. The recommended board action is to approve the report and accept the donation, which I will move. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes 3-0 as well. And then for this segment, item S, and there is a typo on the first page of item S. It is, this report is for fees effective January 1st, 2021, not 2020. So with that correction, the requested board action is to approve the executive director's report regarding OPG fees, which we previously had approved. It's now gone through the posting process. I will move the item forward. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that item passes 3-0, and item T has been moved off today's agenda. That will be handled sometime in January. Thank you, commissioners, for letting me take those items out of order. We'll now go back to item A on the agenda, which is a presentation and discussion from LMU regarding their community survey, Police and Community Relations Survey. Madam Secretary, could you call the relevant people up to speak on that matter, please?
We have Chief Grimala. We also have Alejandra Alarcon and Fernando Guerra.
Welcome all. I'll wait till everyone has joined and is on screen. And please open your mics and turn on your cameras if you choose. Chief Grimala, welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. I'm here to provide a context and just a kind of a preface to LMU's presentation. So in May of 2019, Chief Moore asked his team if they could identify an entity or an institution that could initiate a public sentiment survey for the LAPD. And the focus of that public sentiment survey was on public trust and policing within the city of Los Angeles. So it took a very unique look at who could provide this service, who could also help provide the first of its kind survey so that the department would have a baseline in the future so that we could judge ourselves, our ability and commitment to improving our relationship with the community. And we found a partner that could serve us in 4 areas. One, having the skill and diligent methodology needed to accomplish this task. Secondly, a reputation for integrity. Third, a knowledge of this particular region of the city of Los Angeles, having done surveys before, being a national and international recognized leader in that area, and very, very, and probably most importantly, an entity or institution that had true respect for the voices of the diverse community of Los Angeles. And the department found that in the Thomas and Dorothy Levy Center for the Study of LA at LMU. And in May of 2019, I had the privilege of meeting with Dr. Fernando Guerra, the director of the center, his colleague and associate director, Professor Brianne Gilbert, and their team. And we started to meet and determine a pathway where the department was not directing LMU in this process, but leaning on their integrity, the knowledge and commitment they had to providing a product that the community at large could have trust and belief in. Also, their methodology was extremely important as they described how they go about doing surveys. Many of you may be familiar with the Forecast LA document that LMU produces through the leadership of Dr. Guerra. So The department had met several times with LMU. LMU explained the structure of this survey, and we had great confidence moving forward. But most importantly was not our confidence in LMU, but the community's confidence in that work product. So without further ado, it is absolutely a privilege not only to see, but introduce esteemed director of the Center for the Study of LA at LMU, Dr. Fernando Guerra, and his team here today. Doctor, I turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chief Grimala. I wanted to follow up on a couple of comments that she made, and also maybe if we could start sharing the screen so we can get some of the findings going. I have been at Loyola Marymount University for 36 years. I have been the director of the Center for the Study of Los Angeles for 24 years. During that time, we have conducted surveys that have interviewed tens of thousands of Angelenos using this very same methodology. The findings that we're going to present to you have been weighted in terms of population, in terms of the geographic area to cover the bureaus. And I could assure you that it reflects the population of Los Angeles, and I'm very confident about that. One of the issues, of course, in doing public opinion survey is always the way the questions are written and the order of the questions. And many of us can have conversations about why we wrote certain questions the way we did. I want to take full responsibility and autonomy from those questions. However, we did conduct many focus groups and one-on-one conversations with over 99 individuals out in the community to get their feedback about the type of questions that they would like to see in the survey. These 99 individuals were not part of the 1,700 that we're going to talk about in terms of their findings, but they were very helpful in really helping us decide the ordering, et cetera. In the findings that we're going to present right now, we are presenting them to you in the order that they were asked in the survey, just so you can see the first cut. However, I do group the findings differently. We have a reason for not oftentimes putting the same battery type of questions together because they end up biasing it. So we separate some of these questions out. In my initial comments, I want to regroup them. And I think I have basically about 5 general findings. One is what I call the 4 pillars of support for LAPD, and I will talk a little bit about that. Second, the changing narrative of how people see public safety. Third, some very significant challenges that Angelenos see with LAPD. Fourth, some recommendations. And then fifth, which is really throughout the survey, is that there are significant racial and ethnic differences in how people respond to some of the questions, some geographic differences. We're not going to go through these, but we have over 500 pages of crosstabs that we will make public. And by the way, everything that we're going to present to you and a lot of the crosstabs and the actual data and the code book are all public for any community member, community organization, a city department, or academic who would like to use this data to do their own analysis. And so if we can go to the next, Alejandro, why don't you go to slide 3? Just keep going. I talked a little bit about that. Go back one, just sorry. And see here, I want to again emphasize the methodology that we have used many times at the Center for the Study of Los Angeles, that this was a 20-minute survey over the phone, but we also did some online surveys to capture a younger population. And we also did face-to-face surveys, of course, in a socially distant, appropriate manner, given the situation that we're in. We also did this not only in English and Spanish, but Mandarin and Korean as well. And it was over 55 days from the last day of August throughout all of September and most of October during those 55 days. At the end of the day, we interviewed 1,753 adults and at least 400 in each bureau. You could actually have a very significant survey with about anywhere from 400 to 600 individuals. Why do we do 1,700? So that we could very confidently speak about each bureau and each ethnic group in in terms of their responses. In a way, it's almost as though we ran 6 or 7 surveys simultaneously at the same time, asking the same questions, but in different geographic areas for different racial groups, for different linguistic groups. Let me go to the next page. This is a question that not only at LMU, but throughout other universities and survey research centers we asked, and it's a way to try to measure the optimism or how people, the outlook that generally people have. It's no surprise that this fell under 50% really for the first time in the last 20 years or so, and because of the middle of the pandemic, but it helps you structure that people are seriously thinking about the direction of the city. Next. Here is a trust questions, and I consider one of this the pillar of support for LAPD. People still trust the LAPD. You have 51%. It's really a plurality of those when you consider the don't know or those that didn't answer. But when specifically mentioned with police officers, it goes a little bit higher. This has been higher in the past, and it's a good baseline from us to then take a look at in the future. So if you take a look at least there's still trust in the LAPD. And next slide. This is also begins to speak to the changing narrative that we've been talking about policing, community policing since the 90s. And this narrative, this concepts that truly caught on with Angelenos, and they're highly supportive, over 88%. And this has been pretty consistent and increasing. Next. This is where we talk about another pillar for LAPD. We'll soon, Alejandra, go to the next slide just so I can then come back. This, I think, is very significant. When we ask Angelenos, what should LAPD about? It goes back to the very traditional role of law enforcement, to protect and to serve, to deal with law enforcement. Angelenos still feel that that's what LAPD, and that should be at the core. Now go back, Alejandra. Given that, they also feel that the 2/3 Angelenos feel that LAPD do a good job at this. So in terms of a pillar, LAPD should be focused on law enforcement. LAPD does a good job, and we trust LAPD, at least half of us, in terms of them doing this good job. That is the pillars from which to be able to build a foundation of trust and going forward. Go to the next one, Alejandra, and next, okay. But you could also see here that this is the fourth leg of that pillar, that Angelenos believe that LAPD will protect and serve their neighborhoods or people like me. But you also begin to see some challenges here that 1/3 of the community don't feel that way. And that's a significant chunk of individuals. Furthermore, you could see that LAPD, that 25% of Angelenos believe that LAPD perceives them as a threat, and of course is incredibly higher for African-American males. Next. And then we talk about the treatment of police officers in terms of, this is where you get into some of the challenges. And people have 69% believe that police officers stop some people without good reason. That is a very significant challenge for LAPD in terms of the perception of Angelenos regarding how policing manifests itself out in the city. And I don't want to go through every single one of these because we only have a limited amount of time, but again, the full report will be given to you. Let's go to the next one, Alejandra. Going back to the narrative, we talked about how community policing has really taken on as part of what it means to be an Angeleno, and how we think and how we reimagine LAPD. And so is Black Lives Matter. 2 years ago, we asked this very similar question. And at that point, 71% of Angelenos believed that they agreed and supported the concept of Black Lives Matter. And you can see that increased. And we saw a pattern of that nationally, not just here in Los Angeles. We saw it increase tremendously immediately in June, July, but then we saw it begin to decrease in August and October. It's our belief that this number was probably a little bit higher in June and July, but we captured it in September and October, and I'm very confident that it has probably maintained at that level. So you have this narrative of community policing and Black Lives Matter, and it's very significant. Next, Alejandra. And then about the demonstrations, these are some more of the challenges. As you can see, a plurality of Angelenos believed that LAPD used too much force during the protest against individuals, an appropriate amount of force in terms of protecting property. But again, a significant challenge. Next. And then here we talk about defunding the police. You know, the defunding the police is a difficult concept in terms of it means different things to different people. We try to have three different ways of asking it. We of course wanted to ask the direct question about defunding the police, and clearly there is some significant support for redirecting some of the budget from LAPD. I know you already had this discussion during the chief's report, but I could tell you that Angelenos are somewhat supportive of that. They may not know all the consequences. They may not have all the information that you were clearly discussing, but their gut instinct is that something of this nature has to happen. I think somewhat concerning for LAPD should be the third one, when we were very harsh in terms of asking this question, that you have over a third of Angelenos thinking about completely reimagining to the point of dismantling the existing LAPD. Next. And here is again, reimagining how they would like to see emergency calls. There's a lot here to cover. The bottom line is that we trying to ask the question whether it should just be LAPD officers who respond to these type of emergency calls, or it should be teams of LAPD officers with non-police alternatives. And you can see the differences there. Next. And here the unarmed model. So if you take the community policing response, the belief in the support of Black Lives Matter, and this unarmed model, you see support around 80% of this new narrative. You take those three, these are very broad terms, but it clearly shows you that Angelenos want a new way of thinking about public safety that is very different than it was, let's say 20 to 30 years ago. And this has been emerging, and we've seen the transition in terms of public opinion. So those three things clearly point out this a new emerging narrative. Next, Alejandra. And here we have, we talked about qualified immunity. It's a very difficult term for any resident to kind of understand who's not part of law enforcement or the legal community. So we use this, which statement comes closer to your own views, even if neither is exactly right. And you could see that in terms of a recommendation that clearly Angelenos would like the ability of civilians to continue to pursue lawsuits against police officers to hold them accountable. Next. And then considering attitudes toward LAPD, what shapes your attitudes in this? And of course, it comes from different sources, but you could see that recent events have really impacted how we view LAPD. Next. And here we described your experience. While it's only 1/5, you could tell that 19.8% or 1/5 of Angelenos have had mostly negative experiences with LAPD. Again, a challenge. That's a large group of individuals, and then it's broken down further in terms of when it happened and what the incident involved, if you could see that, and there's a way for us to track that very well. Next. And what kind of improvement would you like to see? And there's a lot of there in terms of, but mostly about decreasing the use of force and less aggression. And these were open-ended questions, which leave a lot of, in terms of how we code them. And so, but at the end of the day, it's clear that 1/5 want to see this more than anything else. And this is in their own voice. We did not give them these categories. The individual respondents came up with these. Next. And that's it. I'll stop right here and take any questions. Again, We gave you the findings in the order that the survey questions were asked, but from our perspective, there are five major findings. One, 4 pillars of support from which the LAPD can continue to increase its legitimacy, its support within the community. They're still there. They're, I think, lower than they have been in the past, but they have the potential to increase. The changing narrative, which is really about community policing, Black Lives Matter, and then the significant challenges that we pointed out. And then, of course, recommendations. And then number 5 is really the racial and geographic differences that do occur. There is thousands of data points, crosstabs that we have on all of this. We asked close to 100 questions, including the demographics, and you have a lot of information that we can dissect. We are making this information available to the community at large, community organizations, academics, and others to be able to do their own analysis. And we are actually willing and capable of helping with that analysis in terms of statistical breakdowns that they may need. And our website will have this information up within a couple of days. I'll stop there and take any questions.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for that presentation. More importantly, thank you very much for the work. It's critically important to our city and to this department to have an analysis and survey like this, as Chief Grimala said at the beginning, incredibly important. So thank you. I also want to thank you not just for your time today, but you previously met with members of the commission, myself included, and explained the methodology, and for which I'm very, very grateful. Just a few questions. One, for members of the public who want to gain access to your report and your data, is it your website that they should go to? Is that?
Yes, yes. And
can you explain for those of us who are not statisticians and do not do surveys of this nature, you indicated that the survey could have been done effectively with 400 to 600 and that you went up to 1,753 in order to capture the cross-section that is Los Angeles, all in the bureaus, and to ensure it was a robust cross-section of the community. But you know, when someone just looks at that number and looks at a city of 4 million, can you just give a, hopefully an English professor,
Sure.
an understanding of how that's a statistically significant sampling that would represent broadly what Los Angeles thinks?
Yeah, I think the best analogy is that when you go to the doctor and they draw blood from you to be able to take an examination and see what your cholesterol level is or other things, they don't take all of your blood, right? Because that would obviously kill the patient, but they take a sample and they take just enough to be able to do the test. And that sample reflects all of the blood that you have and everything that's going on with you. And again, this is like any analogy is not perfect, but what we've done is we've taken a sample of Angelenos that reflect the demographics across the entire city, geographically, ethnically, by age, by income, et cetera. And we're very sure about that because we have a lot of demographic questions where we then can compare that to the census of what Los Angeles is made up of in terms of its the percent Latino, African American, the percent young and old, et cetera. And so we are very confident that our those that we interviewed reflect the makeup of the city without any doubt. And this is not a controversial methodology. It's a methodology that is utilized and implemented by universities, not only throughout the United States, but throughout the world. The challenge, of course, is the actual wording of the questions where people can say, hey, I would have asked it this way instead of that way. And that is up for discussion, absolutely.
Okay. And you did mention a few times in your presentation references to past surveys. Are those also on your website?
Yes, absolutely. So we have asked questions about trust regarding LAPD several times. We've asked questions, I know it's on your agenda, about the use of drones. We've asked questions about body cameras and things of that nature, just in our general surveys about what are the issues that Angelenos are dealing with. Many of the questions, and we asked the previous question about the support of Black Lives Matter, but I would say that about 85% of the questions that are in this survey are new questions that have never been asked by our survey. However, many of the questions have very similar surveys, either nationally or in other cities. So not only did we ask the 99 individuals that we had focus groups and individuals, but we did an extensive literature search and an extensive search of other surveys of how they have asked these questions in other communities.
Very good. Commissioners, may I ask you if you have questions? Thank you. Commissioner Khan.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello, Dr. Guerra.
Commissioner.
So just want to thank you and also acknowledge that you were my professor at LMU and inspired me to care about local government and local politics. So it's so nice to see you.
Yeah. I will be emailing you a quiz right after this to see how well you
Awesome.
took notes.
Awesome. So it's really great to see you. This is a wonderful survey. I'm really interested in the community policing and trust aspect of it. And even more interested in some of the demographic data that I know that you're not able to share everything since there's a limited amount of time. But I'm curious about age and socioeconomic status. I think that it's obviously from my own perspective, I haven't done my own survey, but from my own perspective, I know it's more challenging, to build trust and relationships in lower income communities in LA where crime might be higher, and also even more difficult with young people. So I'm very interested in seeing if there was anything that stood out in your survey, especially in age, 15 to 30, the younger population, as far as trust and, perceptions about law enforcement, if there was anything that stood out or anything that stood out, especially in the kind of socioeconomic demographics.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the questions that you're asking that led us to have such a high sample size so that we could actually address every single one of the aspects that you just asked about in terms of age and income, et cetera. In general, I could tell you like what most of us would hypothesize, that there's less support for LAPD amongst Latinos, African Americans, and much more support amongst Asians and whites, number one. That, that there's much more support about higher income, and that there's, greater support of those who are older. Everything that we would hypothesize, this confirmed, and you say, well, what good is that confirming everything we knew? At least you know where you stand, but you could also see the movement over the years in terms of how the support moved, really, in terms of, for instance, supporting Black Lives Matter, which groups moved, and you see that whites and higher income people moved greater in terms of supporting Black Lives Matter in the last couple of years than any other group. And so there's a lot in there, and we can clearly provide that. I have a lot of students who are very interested in pursuing research projects, and we always like to have them pursue projects that either community organizations or other are interested in following up and actually doing work on their behalf using our data.
Absolutely. And just as a follow-up, this is more for Chief Gramala or everyone. One of the things that stood out for me in your presentation was the public's perception about recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I really care about, so I'm glad it popped up. I didn't think that people thought about recruitment as a way to improve trust and policing. So I just wanted to highlight that. I didn't expect to see it as an outcome or but I look forward to working with Chief Gramala on this. I think it's something that we can do a better job at. But I just wanted to highlight that it's something I didn't expect to see in the survey result, but that I'm very interested in.
I think a key thing, Commissioner, of your point there is that That's an open-ended question. In other words, we did not have that as an option for them to respond. We asked them. And so this came from the respondents themselves saying that they would like to see a lot of focus on training and recruitment. So it's great to pick that up.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Those are my questions, and thank you again. Great seeing you.
Thank you. Commissioner Soboroff, did you have questions, sir?
I do. I want to reemphasize a point that you've made for forever regarding surveys, and especially and this survey, and that is the details, the implementation is in the crosstabs, not in this presentation.
Correct. Yeah.
Because you can tear into any the idea. I mean, my question to you is, what shocks you in this? I mean, very little shocks me. A couple things. I mean, I'm surprised that 37% of the people want to dismantle police departments, and I would want to look very carefully at that, because it's really hard to. So the idea of making policy or making headlines without the crosstabs, I think is irresponsible. And you don't do it. And I hope that the department doesn't do it. And I hope that the media doesn't do it. And saying that, I'm interested in your recommendation of what the department should do with this information. How the department, how I know from a commissioner's perspective, but how can the department look at the crosstabs and make the fullest out of what you've done here, because there's a lot of detail in here, and the implementation. It's real easy to pick any one of these and say, well, it can't be right, or it's totally right, or I know why, or I know. But the question is, what are we going to change? What are we going to change to move the needle in the future? And how does the department use this and use those crosstabs to do that? What can we do to be a good patient?
Yeah. So I'm sorry, that's my wife's phone that she left in the room ringing. My apologies about that. I think number one is that we need to be not data driven, but value driven. And we need to be data informed. We need to know what is happening. And what really I think helps out here is when Angelenos say, hey, we want you to continue to focus on protect and to serve, but we're also concerned with that. Who are the individuals in terms of using crosstabs that are talking about that, and how do we move them there? It's clear from my perspective, the clear thing is that while people said they wanted this, a third said they would think about dismantling it. You take a look at those individuals, many of them also said that the traditional role of LAPD is to protect and to serve. So in their mind, they may want to dismantle the existing LAPD, but they still imagine that there is a public safety entity. What does that mean? The other, I think, major issue here with a lot of this data is how to be able to communicate, because one of the things that you see is how individuals are thinking about these issues, and it allows you to use the very same words or concepts and how that narrative is moving for Angelenos.
Let me go back.
Crosstabs.
Fernando,
Go ahead.
let me go back to the basic question. Instead of this department or the public or the media picking something that they agree with and just saying, hey, look, I'm on this side and I'm an extremist here, and so this validates this, and they're wrong, and I mean, that's what this country's been doing for the last 4 years. As the patient, okay? In other words, you guys are the doctor, you've got the information. How can the department receive this information and not just challenge it, but use it, analyze it to make changes, so we don't waste a bunch of time just going through each one of these and each one of the 500 pages of crosstabs and saying what could be wrong with it, right with it, methodology, or wrong. I'm assuming that it's right. You know, generally, I mean, I think that it's right. It's super. I'm concerned about implementation and what we can do, what the department can do, what the commissioners can do, what the media can do, what the public can do to interpret this for progress and make actual implementation. How do we be a good patient?
Yeah, this is, we have conducted, many surveys that are very specific to policy areas. Finished one earlier this year about public health. We've done something about energy, et cetera. And our response to this question that you're asking, commissioners, is always the same. This is only part of the decision-making process. This does not tell you what to do exactly. It tells you and informs you to then use this data along with the history, all the other subjective data that you have, and more importantly, the objective data. The LAPD has tremendous amount of data that they collect for a variety of different reasons. This is just one aspect and not necessarily the lead set of data that you would have to use, but you have to factor it in and consider it. And so I would not use this data alone to make public policy in any way and would not recommend that. It has to be contextualized with everything else that the department is doing.
Chief Grimala, you're the patient here. What do you think about what the doc is saying and how you want to get well or get better? How are you going to do it without just getting into a series of thousands of people fighting with each other, saying this is right, that's wrong, and just wasting a bunch of time? How do you take this?
Thank you, Mr. Sobroff. I agree with Dr. Guerra. I think this is information. It's one piece of information that informs the department on a reexamination, an internal, a self-reflection of where it is today. And it also helps to provide a focus of where we need to be tomorrow. And what I mean by that is, are the traditional approaches that we believe define community-based policing relevant in those same forms as they were 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago? Is there a different way that we can approach communities in a different model that will create the efficacy to building trust that we need? And I think that these are some of the difficult questions that an organization as large as ours needs to ask, and they need to ask itself. I go back to the comment of Commissioner Calanches. She is so focused on the youth or the younger demographics, 18 to 35. And I know Dr. Guerra and his team ensured that as part of the focus groups and part of the feedback he was getting when we discussed how some of the challenges we have as a department we'd like to see reflected in survey results, and asking these questions came about. And I think the department is still challenged with building that level of trust and communication with that younger demographic. So I think that it is a guide. I think it provides guideposts to the department, but also it gives us pause to reflect on the way we have defined community-based policing, and is there a different, more enriched model, or are there also members of the community groups out there that we have not connected with as fully as we could? And I think that's some of the go-to list of to-do lists assignments that we have in front of us.
I just had two other. I mean, you've got people on this call that have so much experience in this stuff, but I'm very interested in the opinion of next steps or how you think that the department can do best from the Inspector General, from Mark Smith, and also I'd love to hear from Richard Teefank. He's got as much experience in this as anyone in America, and what stands out about this discussion to each of you, and as far as next steps go, if we don't want the next steps just to be a year of tearing apart every question and methodology and the way the questions were. How do we take this and use it to make to protect and to serve?
Well, Commissioner, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me all right. One of the most important things that I took from the presentation, I believe the professor mentioned that the department needs to be data informed, but value driven. And I really appreciated his mention of that. I think in decisions that are made about what policies to promulgate, what changes to policies to make, all of which we are involved in sort of reviewing and making recommendations on, I think that's a standard that our office can be charged with holding the department to make sure that they are making their decisions in a data-informed way, but the decisions that they're making are driven by the values of the department. So that's I think what this study and all the crosstabs that you mentioned a couple of times and all the data points that are in it can be a sort of a guidepost for, is to make sure the department is doing so. And our responsibility, I think, is to watch and make sure that that happens as well. And then lastly, is what our office really does is accountability. So as the department makes whatever decisions it's going to make, as the commission approves whatever policy changes and developments and new types of training and new efforts at recruitment, et cetera, as those things happen, our job is to be a constant watchful eye to make sure that the department lives up to the promises that have been made and the policies that have been adopted by the commission. So for us, again, those are the two things for me. Again, making sure that it's value driven, as the professor said, and then having our office be a watchful eye to make sure that once those decisions are made in a value driven way, the department adheres to them properly. And if they veer off or change course, that we can raise a red flag and say, hey, you need to come back on course to those values that were adopted earlier. I hope that was helpful.
It is. Thank you, Mr. T. And then I'm just going to go on to mute. But Mr. Teefank, what stands out in listening to this discussion and what you've read and your recommendations?
You're on mute, Mr. Teefank.
I apologize. I tend to agree with what Mark mentioned about value driven, but I would not say the department needs to be value driven. Individual officers need to be value driven. This is the place where individual officers can make the difference. It's not the department as an entity. It's the individual officers who can make the difference. I think the officers understanding what this survey says, the impact on how they treat people with respect, and as they go about doing their work, they do it constitutionally. I think that becomes an important part for the officers to understand that they individually make an impact on the perception of people in the community and the reality of how they see the department. So I think it's in training and officers understanding what the survey says and how they contribute to the overall perception of the community about the LAPD and the services they provide. And that to me is a highlight of all this. By treating people with respect, we can change those survey numbers, but I think it all starts with respect.
Thank you. And Commissioner Soboroff, that's the end of your questions you indicated? I just want to check. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Teefank. Thank you, Mr. Inspector General. Appreciate your comments, but most especially thank you to Dr. Guerra and Ms. Alarcon. Thank you. We so appreciate your efforts in this area and providing all of this information. I'm sure we will all have more questions in the future because it certainly will take a bit of time for all of us to absorb the details. And as Mr. Soboroff, Commissioner Soboroff indicated, the crosstabs and analyzing, and we look forward to working with the department on reviewing this further. So thank you. Thank you.
We feel that we are of service to the department, this commission, the city, but most importantly to the people of Los Angeles. So we welcome the opportunity from any organization or group to work with them in terms of the analysis and then future studies. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And we should thank you for your service and your whole organization's service to the city of Los Angeles and working so closely with us. So thank you again very much. And we greatly appreciate your presentation today and taking time out of your busy schedule. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. With that, we'll close out this agenda item since no board action is requested. So thank you again. And Madam Secretary, when you have a moment, if we could bring up, I'll call up item B, and that is the department's report relative to the body worn video and digital in-car video system, the audit. And I believe it's Commander Rimkunis and Ms. Unzicker. And as soon as they come up, I'd ask them to open their microphones and their cameras if they can. And I'm not sure, Commander, is it just you presenting today or your colleague from the Audit Division?
Oh, good afternoon, Commissioner Decker and fellow commissioners and Chief Frank. So I have the Audit Division CO with me, and she'll be starting the presentation, and then I will pick up and address any specific questions.
Very good, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Trina Unzicker with the Audit Division. We performed an audit and a special review of the department's body-worn video and digital in-car video systems. For both, we looked at activation and deactivation rates in compliance with start of watch testing and documentation. We also reviewed the rate at which a 2-minute buffer could be verified. The audit showed strong overall compliance of between 83 and 100% with Audit Division's objectives. For the special review of the 2-minute buffering, we noted that 24% of the body-worn videos audited did not have a full 2-minute buffer. These findings led to a couple of recommendations that are included on page 2 of our report. The first is to amend the CAD summary system to make it easier for officers to document video systems information and also act as a reminder for officers to activate their video systems. And the second is that the department provide additional training to officers regarding the requirements of the video systems equipment. Of course, Commander Rimkunis of OO is also here to respond to the audit and discuss actions taken by OO to address these findings. I'm also joined by my project manager, Gennady Danilkovich, and he can answer questions about the audit as well.
Very good. I'm sure there are some questions from commissioners. I have a few, and by the way, thank you for the audit. Thank you for summarizing it. And I would, and I assume, Commander, perhaps this question's for you, but the issue of body-worn cameras, the Commission obviously has supported for many years. And I note that the Task Force on 21st Century Policing, organized under then President Obama, discussed body-worn cameras also and cited to it specifically in its report on finding that wearing body cameras had they said an 85% chance of fewer incidents of uses of force and 59% fewer complaints than officers not wearing it, and concluded self-awareness of videotaping might have an impact on both officers and the public alike, and contributed to a very positive outcome or more positive outcome in police-citizen interaction. And similarly, a more recent report, The New Era of Public Safety by the Leadership Conference, talked about having the increase in video footage, increased transparency by providing firsthand accounts of interactions with the public. So both of these reports, and I should say also some reports that the Commission has received recently, the annual complaint report and others, have indicated the importance of the body-worn video camera system and the benefits it offers the department. But some members of the public in the public comment section, and particularly the written comments that were sent to us, are deeply concerned about the privacy issues associated with the use of these cameras. And I wonder if you can address briefly the protocols in place to ensure that individual members of the public, that their privacies are being protected, particularly those members of the public that are not engaged in any investigation. They just may be a passerby, things like that. Commander.
Yes, ma'am. So I just want to start out by saying both the body-worn video and digital in-car video policy, we have two special orders. There's special order number 12 that was dated April 28, 2015, that officers are trained on in regards to body-worn video procedures. And second, special order number 45 dated October 20th, 2019, talks about digital in-car video procedures. And I want to start by saying the objectives of body-worn video and digital in-car video are primarily to promote accountability, transparency, and improving public trust with everyone in the community. And specifically to those special orders, you know, within the policies, officers are reminded of the confidential nature of recordings and that body-worn video use is limited to enforcement and investigative activities involving members of the public. The body-worn video recordings will capture video and audio evidence for use in critical investigations, administrative reviews, and other proceedings protected by confidentiality laws and department policy. I think that's critically important because these videos are used specifically for that. They go nowhere other than for investigative type of purposes. LAPD Volume 3, Section 405 also states which officers are held accountable for. Its confidential nature of department records, reports, and information states that all official files, documents, recordings, reports, photographs, imaging, recordings, and information held by department or the custody or control of an employee of the department must be regarded as confidential. So the confidentiality is paramount in regards to our digital in-car video and body-worn policies. There's numerous inspections in place that during the course of reviews that we monitor, whether it's the Office of Operations, Office of Special Operations, Force Investigation Division, Critical Incident Review Division, to where we adhere and we monitor the policies and ensure that the officers are well aware of what they can and can't do in regards to body-worn video and digital in-car video.
Commander, could you follow up a little more on that final point? You talked about inspections and
yes, ma'am.
And having also seen your oversight, your internal oversight during the CompStat process. I wonder if you could explain, you know, different layers of that process. We have today a more formal audit, but there are obviously other things that happen in terms of reviewing the process and procedures and that the equipment is being used in an appropriate manner.
So in regards to audits, you know, the department conducts numerous audits, and I will talk specifically about the Office of Operations, but the Office of Special Operations that in which Metro Traffic Group, Security Service Division works in, they also adhere to the same audit principles. But inspections are performed at the recommendation of the Chief of Police, the Director of the Office of Operations, myself, a bureau chief, a bureau commander, so they can happen at any point. But specifically in regards to body-worn video, you know, we look at start of watch checks, we check for continual buffering, activational type of inspections, video completeness, seatbelt usage for folks that are placed in our police cars, and also incident tagging for further review during any type of audit or an additional type of investigation. If you look at the operational bureaus, they conduct similar type of investigations, but primarily the operational bureaus conduct body-worn video and digital in-car video compliance. In 2018, we added an additional type of audit in regards to our gang enforcement units, where we look at consent type of stops. We look at the contacts for procedural justice, AFDR review, and tactical communication amongst the officers involved. And that was a pilot program that was that will be ending here at the end of this year. But that's what the operational bureaus look at. For example, in the course of audits, a bureau inspection team over a course of a year will review 39,000 videos. So that's quite a few number of videos within a bureau. You know, so the auditors that are tasked to reviewing that equates to about 3,000 videos a year. If you look at how those videos are looked at and who's looking at them at the area level, you have sergeants, lieutenants, area captains, patrol captains, and then at the conclusion of that review, it goes to a bureau commander, a bureau chief, and ultimately up to the Office of Operations for concurrence. And as I mentioned earlier, some of those videos will be reviewed by the Chief of Police as well, depending on the type of video and what the situation is. And, you know, we can talk about critical videos during use of force incidents, pursuit review. You have pursuit review division, critical incident review division, FID. So there's a number of different audits that take place looking for body worn video compliance, buffering, that get reviewed at a bunch of different levels. And depending on the severity or type of incident that we're looking at, it can ultimately go up to the chief of police for concurrence on actions taken per se.
Thank you, Commander. That was helpful. Commissioners, other questions on the audit? Commissioner Kalanche, did you have questions? Commissioner Soboroff? Is that a no? I just want to be sure I give everybody time. You're on mute, sir. So.
No, yeah, I'm sorry. It's a quick yes. As I go through this, and I agree with the recommendations. I want to say that, you know, we started this with a policy in pencil, and that was the right thing to do, because we were on the front end of this, and there's right ways and wrong ways to do anything. And I think that the attitude shown here is that we're still in pencil. It's still maturing. It's still changing. But overall, it's it does exactly what it's supposed to do, and that is affect behavior and capture behavior on both sides of the cameras. And I think it's an overwhelming plus. And I just encourage us to, you know, keep the pens away and keep the policy in pencil, so we can update it and change it as the demand changes, as law enforcement changes.
And as technology changes too. Sorry, go ahead, Commander.
You know, I just wanted to add, this audit was conducted in January, and that was at a time when we were transforming the organization in regards to really getting a grasp of what was happening in the body-worn video world. And we've taken numerous steps. There's numerous notices and things that have been out. And I would just like to highlight, I know our percentage, you know, is showing a 24 or so % on buffering, but at this point, you know, in July, we were at a 93%. In August, we went up to 96%. And in September, we're at 97% in regards to overall body-worn video compliance in the area of buffering. And we're continually working with our IT folks to, during documentation, I know that was a low mark for us as well, but I do have to say that the start of watch video checks were complete, but the amendment to the officers' logs will help in that matter. That'll show that officers are documenting as required. And I just like to, with the final thing would say is that I got to give a lot of credit to the league on this, to the LAPPL, working with Craig Lally. I'm directly working with him and some members of some membership, you know, to really fine tune the workings of body-worn video. Officers have created a body-worn flow chart to help out in the overall assessment of body-worn videos and in regards to discipline. And we're also looking nationwide at other policies and procedures, you know, to really make sure that we're doing monitoring body-worn video the right way. So just want to say thanks, and that's been very productive.
Thank you. Commissioner Soboroff?
That's fine. Thank you.
Is that very good? And thank you. Yes, we'll definitely need the assistance of everyone in the department. And Commander, I appreciate you and the department's undertaking to improve that. Very important. Anything? No? Okay. Very good. With that, the recommended board action is to approve the department's report, which I will move. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 It opposed? It passes 3-0. Thank you very much, Commander. I appreciate your work on this. Next, commissioners, I'm going to call 3 items up. I think it's the same presenters. I think these are policy changes. I'm going to call up C, D, and G. C, D, and G. And I believe it's Ms. Rhodes, Deputy Chief Pitcher, on these matters. And if I could, I'm just going to summarize these and ask the department whether I've accurately summarized them, and then open them up to questions. First, item C is an update to policies relating to persons suffering from a mental illness, which incorporates tactical disengagement, which was part of a training bulletin previously given to officers, and indicates that officers shall evaluate the totality of the situation when facilitating taking an individual into custody without escalating the situation, and the officers are given the flexibility to determine whether or not handcuffs are in fact required. Item D is an update to the definition of hate crime. What is hate crime? And making it more consistent with California Penal Code. Also provides definition of bias and clarifies that department employees all have responsibilities when they are aware of a hate crime or incident motivated by hate or prejudice comes to their attention. And item G relates to the carotid restraint control hold. You all are aware the commission previously issued a moratorium on that and then banned it. And then the state of California similarly banned its use. And these policy provided to us updates the department policy to reflect those changes. Ms. Rhodes, Chief Pitcher, do I have that correct? That summary?
Yes.
Yes.
You do.
All right, very good. Commissioners, are there any questions on these particular items? I don't see any.
No.
I see head shaking no. I thought these were pretty straightforward and items that we have discussed previously. So why don't we then proceed to votes on these matters? I'll call them up in order. Item C, the department's report relevant to contact with persons suffering from mental illness. The recommended board action is to approve the department's report. I will move that forward. Is there a second? It's seconded. Say aye. Aye.
We're losing reception,
Yeah.
Eileen.
Sorry. Let's try that again. Let's
Okay.
do another vote then. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Item C passes 3-0. Item D, I'll call that up now. Item D, the department's report relative to reporting incidents motivated by hatred or prejudice. The recommended board action is to approve the department's report, which I will move forward. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It passes 3-0. And then item G. Item G is the department's report relative to officer-involved shootings or in-custody deaths. This is related to the carotid restraint control hold. The recommended board action is to approve the report, which I will move forward. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? All right, it passes 3-0 as well. Thank you very much. That concludes items C, D, and G. I'll now call up items E and F together. The two policy proposals for us, one on the use of photo comparison technology and the other on the automation usage, ALPR. And also provided on our agenda was the state audit that was previously issued on that matter. I'm not sure who's presenting on the photo comparison. Why don't we take that first? Item E.
Hello, Commissioners. This is Director Rhodes, and I can present on the photo comparison technology. This is a policy that goes back to the core values of the Los Angeles Police Department. It balances the reverence for the law, which is Assembly Bill 1215, prohibiting the use of certain kinds of sample photos to be used in biometric or facial recognition. But it also has a service to the community, including protecting and safeguarding the victims through the use of technology, and a responsibility to our people. Similarly, making sure our practices match up with our values, and that includes basic oversight. In summary, the policy does 4 things. It establishes the limited use of photo comparison technology as contemplated by the law. That is AB 1215, which I mentioned previously. Second, it authorizes the one system that can be used by LAPD, and that's the digital mugshot system of the county identification system, and it prohibits others. Third, it establishes the necessary training for use of the digital mugshot system, or DMS. And fourth, it outlines some basic oversight, because now and historically, there's some skepticism, and we want to make sure that the public sees and what the department is using technology for. So it establishes some basic oversight and ability to report back, not just anecdotally, but with something that we can show numbers about. I would, again, tell you what I believe you probably know, which is that AB 1215 expires in 2023. And I think that the Los Angeles Police Department, as one of the largest police departments in the country and certainly in the state, will have the ability to inform the public and the legislature what this technology has been used for, how often it is used, and what the results are. And so that's what this policy is meant to do. And if you'd like, I can go on and talk about the automated license plate reader first and then take questions, or whatever you would like. Okay.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Please let me know if I'm breaking up in any way. So the automated license plate reader policy is based on both Senate Bill 34, and then subsequent to that, in February of 2020, February of this year, the auditor for the state of California performed an audit of local law enforcement agencies on the use of ALPR and indicated 6 specific elements that law enforcement agencies must include in their policies. They also describe some best practices. The Los Angeles Police Department policy here complies with those 6, as well as many of the best practices that are in that audit. Those 6 are: 1, to outline the purpose for use of automated license plate readers, and this policy does that. The second one is to describe who are the users. This policy does that, and in fact provides both users and administrators. So has 2 categories of users. One is a higher level than the other. The third thing is set forth training that is needed for both users, basic users, and administrators. And so it complies with that. Fourth, the state audit determined that there must be a description of monitoring the system to ensure security and to comply with privacy laws. That also is taken care of in this policy. Starting on page 4, it discusses this element with quality assurance and also data security. 5, it restricts the 5th element that the state auditors found that must be in all policies would be a restriction on sales and the sharing of information. This policy restricts both of those and talks about sharing only with other law enforcement agencies who will use the data in the same way or in a more restrictive way than the LAPD policy. And finally, it discusses retention and deletion. It does that, and it has both a logical deletion and an automatic deletion, unless with the exception that data used for prosecutions or administrative hearings should be retained. In addition, the audit discussed some of the best practices and those have been adopted, for example, regarding security requirements to protect information. That's been adopted here. Additionally, the policy noted that agencies that it looked at the time based retention policies not on usefulness of data. This policy provides a guidance for that, so we will be able to look at data used and determine what was useful and when. So that is what this policy does. It complies with the law, the audit, and the core values of the Los Angeles Police Department.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Commissioners, I neglected to provide a brief introduction to you to let you know that both of these policies were worked on by the data subcommittee. Commissioner Bonner and myself worked with different members of the department in the development of these items. Obviously, the ALPR policy is drawn out of both, as Ms. Rhodes said, California state law and the audit that took place, and to ensure that the department's written policy reflects its usage, but compliance with state law and the different best practices, as Ms. Rhodes highlighted in her presentation, that were all highlighted in the audit. The audit's been public for some time, so we will proceed with a vote on that today after questions. But with respect to the photo comparison policy, while the subcommittee did look at that, this is the first time that this has really been brought to public light. So we thought it better to leave it open for public comment for a period of time. So it will be brought back to us, I believe, Mr. Teefank, I believe it'll be sometime in January. Is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner, that's correct.
But public comment will be open until December 22nd. So members of the public who wish to comment on this, we'd ask them to please provide it by December 22nd, and it will be brought back on our first meeting in January when we return. Just so you understand procedurally where we're heading on both of these items. So commissioners, I certainly have had a chance to ask questions of the department regarding these policies. And so I would, offer you first. Mr. Soboroff, I see you've opened your microphone already. Do you have questions, sir?
The reason that I don't is that I've already asked them, and I've gotten responses. So I sort of did it during the homework time. So I'm good to go.
And I certainly appreciate that particularly when we have a long agenda. It's very helpful to do that. But I don't want to interrupt anybody who may have a question. Commissioner Kalanche, do you have any questions at this time? I know you spend a lot of time preparing for these meetings as well.
Yeah, no, I'm actually good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, and I should just ask the department, because we did get some public comment, and this is for Ms. Rhodes or for Deputy Chief Pitcher. I know both of your teams have been working on these, that you got concurrence with the chief, but a number of public comment were saying how this will tie the hands of the department. Can you comment on that?
So the policy as written, as I think you mentioned, Commissioner Decker, puts in writing what we have been doing and what the law is. We use the DMS system, which is the digital mugshot system, and the training that is required in order to use it. It is a system out of the Los Angeles County regional identification system, and so the training is already set up. The way that people can get into the training is set up. This policy does not limit that. The policy does ask for some oversight at a basic level, which should not take substantial amounts of time, but should provide the department and the public with some information about what actually is the system is used for and how beneficial it either is or is not. And otherwise, there is a certain blindness.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Chief Pitcher, did you want to add anything to that, sir?
Yes, I concur with Director Rhodes. In fact, she has worked with the Information Technology Bureau to develop a drop-down menu that will basically cause this effort, which are basically 7 questions for the investigator as to why they use the system and what the results were, which is very valuable. That will move very quickly once that ITB develops that system. So I don't see any very long, drawn out, hurdles in this process. And I think that's going to make it go very quick and yield some very good information in the end.
Thank you, Chief. And I'll only add to my colleagues, having worked on the data subcommittee on these issues, the goal is to hopefully collect information to ensure the public can trust the manner in which the department is using this technology. As you know, there have been some cities that have banned the use of this technology. Some departments are not able to use it. But by having this basic data, we hope that we can, and the department can provide public information and be transparent in its usage and assure public confidence in the use of this form of technology. So with that, unless there are any questions, we will hold the photo comparison policy pending written public comment opportunities, and the email address to submit your written public comment is photomugshot@lapd.online. That is written in the agenda. We'll keep public comment open on that email address until December 22nd, and it will be called back in early January. I will now call item F, the department's report relative to the automated license plate recognition, usage, and privacy policy. And the recommended board action is to approve the department's report, which I will move forward. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye, sorry.
That's okay. Oppose? No. Opposition passes 3-0. Chief Pitcher, I see you're on item K, sir. And since you're already at the table and on screen, colleagues, and thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Would you mind, sir, if we just go directly to item K, which is your report, with apologies to the, well, Chief Frank, you're on the other items. So let's handle Chief Pitcher's matter so he can return to his bureau. And this is the report that the board action is to review and approve. So this report can go to City Council, where they filed a motion asking for the department to respond, as you can see on page 2 of the motion, about the specialized units and the response teams. And here there's a report on the SMART teams, the DART teams, and the HOPE teams. Chief, did you want to give us any summary here, a background?
Yes. Yes, essentially what this asks is for the SMART team, or the system-wide mental health assessment response team that we operate out of Detective Support and Vice Division, that responds out in the field with the Department of Mental Health, County Department of Mental Health clinicians, to basically respond to all of the radio calls that have mental health issues attached. This now makes this program a co-responder, whereas they responded after the radio car came in. Now they will be responding with that radio car, and with the primary benefit and advantage of being able to provide that all of everything that they do to the families and the subject as the officers are dealing with the mental health call, rather than later. So what that does is sets this up. It will be dispatched now as a support element at the same time the radio car gets there, rather than later. We feel that is going to be very beneficial, not only in the initial handling, where they will be able to de-escalate the incident a little more effectively, typically, than potentially the radio car officers. So we're looking forward to this program. And then also it talks about the D.D. Hirsch, the 911 diversion program that is attached, where the department will now be looking at mental health calls that will be diverted to the D.D. Hirsch Mental Health Service call location where you have non-imminent suicide or behavioral health related calls, those will go straight over from communications to the D.D. Hirsch clinician staff call load. So that will reduce our call loads and ultimately allow them to more effectively provide guidance, direction, and services to the individuals where they don't have any imminent suicide or behavioral health issues.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioners? Questions for Chief Pitcher? No, not from either of you. Thank you, Chief Pitcher. Greatly appreciate this information, and of course, obviously responding to questions raised by City Council, but appreciate your efforts with respect to all of these very important programs. Colleagues, the recommended board action is to approve the report and transmit to City Council. I'll move that forward. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes 3-0. Thank you very much, Chief Pitcher.
Thank you, ma'am.
The final matters we have on today's regular agenda before we move to closed session are items H, I, and J. These are all related to the small unmanned aerial systems. There's the annual report, update to guidelines and procedures, and a donation. And Chief Frank, I think you are on all of those matters. So I see we have a report, and obviously they're all interrelated, an update to the policy to account for some additional usage, as well as in the donation for hazmat capabilities. So Chief, why don't I let you provide the summary, and then I'll open it for questions.
Good morning, Commissioners. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity, for providing me the opportunity to provide some context for these 3 agenda items. So just a little bit of background. Back on July 16th of 2018, the department implemented a 1-year pilot program to evaluate whether or not an SUAS would enhance the ability of Metropolitan Division's Special Weapons and Tactics team to safely resolve dangerous, high-risk tactical situations. Additionally, it was to evaluate the SUAS's potential to greatly improve the situational awareness capabilities of the department during natural disasters, catastrophic and hazardous material incidents. We kept in mind a reverence for human life, and this served as a guiding principle for the implementation of this particular pilot program. It was also opined that the deployment of the SUAS would enhance the department's ability to protect and serve the public. Following the successful completion of the pilot program, this commission on September 26th of last year, September 26th, approved and the department established the SUAS program guidelines. This is currently delineated in Special Order number 8 of 2019. The guidelines required an annual report to the Board of Police Commission on the use of the SUAS deployment. Before you today is the second such report, the report covers 7 areas in which we were asked to evaluate on. I'm not going to go through all 7 of those, but also before you, Commissioner Decker, as you indicated, are a couple of other things. There's a revised proposal to department policy, because we are asking to add an additional entity, that being traffic group, to this program. So we're revising. We have a proposal to revise the department's policy to incorporate that, but additionally to accept a donation of an SUAS to our department's hazardous materials team. This team was already approved by this commission to employ the use of an SUAS in hazardous material situations. So now we finally found a donor. The Police Foundation has acquired a donor for us to be able to provide this. So that's the 3rd item on the agenda, to accept this donation. So I am open to the commission for any additional questions that you may have. And thank you very much in advance for your time.
Thank you, Chief Frank. And just so for clarity, the policy currently provides for the capability, or the policy provides the department can use it for hazmat services. And today you're asking to accept the donation that will allow you to get that equipment. That's like step one, correct?
That is correct, Commissioner.
Okay. And then you're also asking for a revision in the policy in order to use it for traffic purposes. And I would imagine, Chief, just to, if you could elaborate a little bit on the use, it would strike me that that could save a lot of human resources by using this sort of equipment in the traffic context. If you could explain the usage.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that opportunity. So, Commissioner and the Board of Commissioners, currently, when our traffic folks respond to what we call the multi-collision investigation team, when they respond to traffic collisions of a major importance, and that's normally when there's significant potential for city liability, we deploy our MSIT team, which is that major collision investigation team, to these incidents. They use a current technology called the total concept. And basically they have to do a 360-degree photographic recreation of the area and of the incident. This would normally take them, the current technology that they use takes them somewhere in the area of about 10 to 12 hours to do. This particular technology, by using an SUAS, would drastically, significantly reduce that time to about less than 2 hours. And I should also add that there are several entities here in Southern California, law enforcement agencies, who already are using that technology, including the California Highway Patrol and several of the other agencies within Southern California. They're already using that technology. Not only would this save us in terms of time and resources, but the time that it takes us when we have to use the current technology, we'd have to shut down traffic in an area for hours upon hours. We can do that same job in about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I should also add that this kind of technology is very much preferred by the city attorney and the district attorney's office.
Very well. Commissioners, other questions? I see Mr. Soberoff's no. Commissioner Kalanche?
Yeah, actually, these are just more for my own education and understanding. One was the use of the I don't want to call it a drone, but I think it is a drone. The UAS has only been used 7 times. Is that what's in?
So that is one of the things we have to do, Commissioner, is that we have to give an annual report. So
Okay.
this that we're giving you is the annual report that covers part of last year into this year.
Okay.
One of the things we promised this commission that we would do is that we would be very judicious in the use, because we're very concerned. Obviously, we're very mindful of the public's perceptions on the use of this type of technology. So we use it right now when we believe it's absolutely necessary. And again, it's in the case of officer safety issues, when the use of this is much more advantageous as opposed to using an airship or for officer safety. So in this particular year, this report, we've only used, it's only used and approved on about 7 occasions.
Which shows me that you're, being very judicious with its use. So that's good to hear. The other quick question, just as I was looking for my notes, is in that same report where there's a bill in Congress that might ban the use of any Chinese-made UAS, right? Which would make all of our current equipment unusable. I was just curious about that.
So just to give some background on that, Commissioner, several years ago, there's this company DJI, which is a Chinese company. Several years ago, there was discussion at the time when I was assigned as the commanding officer of Counterterrorism Special Operations Bureau, that DJI was actually, that owns this company is actually a Chinese-owned company, and that they would have access to data that these SUAS would, collect and thereby jeopardize U.S. security. That's something that's been going on for years. Okay. I can tell you right now that there are federal agencies that use this particular type of SUAS. It's the best one that we've seen on the market. And so they've had those discussions, but nothing has occurred. So that's just something that we felt in full disclosure that we had to say, these are talks that are on the horizon, but we don't anticipate that being the case.
Okay.
And there's nothing that we're using. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just curious, because at some point, if this were to happen, then all of our equipment is not usable.
There's all the disclosure to the commission.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. That was it.
Thank you. Chief Frank, just to follow up, I would like to, I know your report is to recommend the ultimate purchase of several different types of UASs. I'd like to modify this for just the ones that you have immediate access to, or it appears that you're likely to get access to. And I'm talking about the one that's before us today, the hazmat one, the Matrice 210, that's on page 7, page 8, the Phantom Pro that's being used for training, and then the one on page 10 for traffic group, which is why we're changing the policy today. I'd like to limit the board's action today to just those and ask the department to come back if and when you have access to additional equipment that you'd like approval on, because the situation may change between now and the time that you gain access. But it's good for us to see what your long-term vision is. So I very much appreciate that. But in terms of board action, I would limit that to those 3. Do you have any objection to that, Chief Frank?
Not at all, Commissioner. I think you absolutely hit it on the nose. One of the things we tried to do is to give this commission some thought process in terms of where we were looking down the road. But I totally agree with you. These are the years, these are the ones that we've actually got funding for. So that makes sense. And clearly, as you've seen over the years, the technology changes so fast. So for the other 2 that we don't have funding for at this time, it would make sense that we'd have no problems. I've discussed this with the chief. We'd have no problems with holding up on those 2 and then coming back down the road when we do find funding. And technology may very well change at that time, that it may not be.
Exactly. And I appreciate that, Chief Frank. I just want to be sure that the commission can evaluate at the appropriate point in time what the needs are, why you're asking for it, and be sure that we all concur. And that's not to suggest that I or we are opposed to it. I'm just suggesting it's more prudent to wait until you actually have the equipment, the funding, which of course, as our earlier discussion today indicates, funding issues are very precarious at the moment, but also that the needs of the department may change over time. So with that amendment, commissioners, I'll move the matter forward, which the requested board action, I should take them one at a time. First, it's with respect to the department's report, item H, to approve the department's report, of course, with the amendment that I just made. So I'll move that forward. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes 3-0. And then the item I, which is the modification to the policy. The recommended board action is to approve the department's report. I will move that forward.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then finally on this series of matters, item J, which is to accept the donation, and the requested board action is to approve the report, transmit to the mayor and city council for acceptance. I'll move that forward. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, those items all pass 3-0. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Frank. And let me just check on the agenda. I believe we covered all items. Mr. T. Frank, can you do a double check? Did I leave any item out? I think we covered everything.
No, Commissioner, we're good to go to closed session.
Very good. Madam Secretary, please bring us to closed session.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss agenda item 4A1 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Thank you all. We are back in session. We had one short matter to consider. Mr. T. Frank, would you do a readout of that matter, please?
Yes, Madam President, the board's concluded its action in closed session for item 4A1, non-tactical unintentional discharge 004-20. Commission adopted the chief's recommendations unanimously, and those recommendations were tactics, tactical debrief, 1 Sergeant 2, drawing and exhibiting does not apply, non-tactical unintentional discharge, administrative disapproval, negligent discharge, 1 Sergeant 2. That concludes the report out.
Thank you very much. The only matter left is for a motion to adjourn, which I will make. Is it seconded by anyone? Commissioner Severov has seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes. We stand adjourned until the next scheduled board meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.